There we go. All right. Welcome back to another Teach 'em Chuck shoot, I can't even talk. I don't know if I'm ready. Shoot. But anyway, welcome to another Teach 'em Chuck broadcast. I was trying to say podcast and broadcast at the same time, and I got, the words just kind of. But here we go again. Got a good one for y'all. IG, pardon the impersonal nature of this presentation, because I will be looking at the camera for the majority of this discussion, because I am taping for YouTube. Let me, again, guys, I'm just going to throw my little Cash App in the comment section. I'm going to pin it to the top. If the spirit moves you to, donate a little something, feel free. If not, it's all good. I do this because I enjoy it, right? I love it. I love y'all. And I'm trying to pin it, but it's not letting me do it. Anyway, it's all good. Let me try it again. If I can't pin it, then, yeah, YouTube is acting crazy. What's up, The Real? ICEO, Wacko, Dave, everybody, my lovely wife. So, what are we here to talk about today? First of all, Blanche Robinson, you bogus, man. You did this to me last time when I did my social gospel, the heresy, the social gospel heresy, detailing MLK's connection to the communist movement. You was going live at the same time I was going live, man. You ain't right, bro. Can I eat? I'm saying, Blanche, can I eat? We got the same followers, bro. They all watching you right now. Hey, can I eat, bro? I'm just messing with you, though, man. Y'all, if y'all don't know about my boy, he is Blanche. Go follow his IG page, and he has a YouTube channel as well. Go check him out. He's doing like a series on original sins. It's extremely interesting and thought-provoking. So shout out to my boy, Blanche. Again, y'all, another friend of mine recently posted something in her story making fun of folks who really ain't got an IG, ain't really got a following like that. My homegirl, Kathy, she say, cats be going live with one person in the chat talking about, let me see who in here. I thought that was funny, but hey, man, we all got to start somewhere. And, here I am. So, I got to do what I got to do. I got a PayPal too, y'all. I think I do. I don't even use it, but when I post this on YouTube, I'm going to put the PayPal email or whatever, just in case if you want to donate to your mans. That way you can do it like that for my folks not in the U.S. I have some new specs too, y'all. I don't know if y'all check out my new spectacles. Trying to look smart. So, house cleaning. Anyway, last time, I did the talk on MLK. I tried to come in the following broadcast and just clear up whatever errors I made. I caught a couple. I know that in 1952, when King wrote a letter to Coretta Scott King, enthusiastic about his discovery of Protestant theologian Walter Rauschenbusch and his work Christianity and the Social Gospel, I said that he wrote a letter to his wife. That is a bit untrue. They were not married at the time. They would soon be married. They would marry in 1953. So in 52, they were not yet married. Also, I think I spoke about the Fabian Society, and I spoke about how there was an American counterpart on American campuses to the Fabian Society in London, and I couldn't think of the name of it. The name of the American counterpart to the London School of Economics Fabian Society was called the Intercollegiate Socialist Society. The Intercollegiate Socialist Society, if you're interested. And I know I probably flubbed up and made a couple of other mistakes and errors in that 2.5 hour long breakdown. I just, maybe forgot a couple or just didn't catch them. So there's that. So moving on. Now, today, as you all in IG can see the title, I titled this America's Viet Cong, the politics of murder. The politics of murder. Sounds a bit interesting, intriguing. I know y'all probably thinking, well, what the heck is this about? Just bear with me, and we're gonna get into it. I'm starting to do a little something, y'all, because we kind of got this echo chamber thing happening on both sides, so-called, right? We sort of talk amongst ourselves, and then they kind of do their thing over there, whatever. And, never the twain shall meet, right? Because we don't really fool with each other like that. A friend of mine, he does something. Like, he traverses the social media landscape, and when he finds things that he thinks that I will find interesting or motivating, he likes to tag me in the comment section. Now, before, he would try and encourage me to engage with people in the comment section in social media corners where I don't want to congregate. But he say, Chuck, you got to go over there, man. Engage them, right? And go in there and entice them and say something, a bit off the wall or strange to get them to say, who is this crazy dude? And then when they come over to your Instagram page, then that's when you hit them with the substance, right? But you got to just throw yourself out there, right? And just come across and just kind of, collide with them and see what happens. Well, I tried that for a while, and nobody would talk back to me. And I put a lot of time and energy and focus into the things that I post on Instagram, right? Even before I hit the send button, I proofread it like 10, 12, 11 times just to make sure I don't have any typos in it. And I still end up with typos sometimes. And when I do, I delete the comment and type it all over again. That's how serious I am, even with something as trivial at times as Instagram, because we know about the foolery that goes on Instagram. So my friend, this same friend that I'm talking about, and another guy tagged me in this clip that's going viral. I know a lot of you have seen it, right? All right, it's a clip of Henry Louis Gates Jr.'s work that he's doing on PBS, where he is exploring the ancestral backgrounds of a lot of famous folk in the country, right? And there's one going around now where he is having a sit-down talk with none other than Angela Davis. I know a lot of y'all seen it, right? I know some of y'all in the comment section in IG has seen it, where Angela Davis is brought into the knowledge that one of her ancestors was on the Mayflower. And she was taken aback by this. She couldn't believe it. She was, oh, no, don't tell me that. I don't want to, oh, no. One of my ancestors was on the Mayflower. She was indifferent to it, to say the least. Right. She was appalled at the fact that she had Mayflower ancestry. This is Angela Davis. Now, the two Instagram pages, I got one from the Shade Room and another one from this other Instagram page called Neighborhood Talk. Now, normally I wouldn't be caught dead in those kinds of spaces, because spaces like the Shade Room is where you get a lot of bullshit. And let me say this too: a lot of people have been like, Chuck, yeah, man, whew, we hope God touched that mouth. Well, we praying for you, but let me tell y'all something. I'm gonna try to work on it, but I can't make no promises, because I'm gonna tell you like I am starting to tell myself, right? Because I get a lot of Christian folk and a lot of God-fearing folk over here, as far because there are a lot of conservatives and a lot of Christians in the space of conservative politics, right? But I don't know. I know I may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I am what I am. This ain't church. All right? If my style, my presentation, if my language offends you, I'm sorry, but this ain't church. All right? I know sometimes I can, I'm going to try to do my best to avoid, but, it is what it is, y'all. It is what it is. Not saying that I won't strive to do better, but just bear in mind, y'all, that, don't come here if you're looking for that, because this ain't church. All right. Now, again, back to the Shade Room. I don't fool with that. All right. Again, that's where you get a lot of the foolishness, a lot of the BS, and a lot of the nonsense. Right. And so he sent me the Angela Davis clip. And so what I did was I went through the comment section because I was just curious, right? Because I wanted to know what people were saying, right? So going back to what I was saying about, people not really wanting to engage me, not really wanting to fool with me. Well, I tell you what, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start calling y'all out. Wait a minute. Because I'm going to start trying to bring some of y'all over into this discussion. IG, do y'all mind? Do y'all mind if I do that? If I bring company into the chat? This person, Brittany the developer, has a public profile. She has 209 posts and 493 followers. Now, mind you, the Shade Room and Neighborhood Talk has over 1 million followers on Instagram a piece, right? So I can't go through the entire comment section, but I just skimmed through it just a little bit because I use this for inspiration. Hell, part of the reason why I can't clean myself up, because, folks always trying to get me riled up. Well, guess what? And what I'm going to say here today is meant to be. I'm going to say it in a provocative manner. This is meant to be insightful. I am trying to incite and entice because I want that smoke. Because y'all going to ignore me and act like y'all don't hear me, act like y'all don't see me. Well, I'm going to bring you into my world. Let's see if you man enough to stand up over here. Because y'all keep talking that BS over there to one another. But see, no, it's time for y'all to get hit in the mouth. Not literally, but intellectually. I'm not advocating violence against anybody, against anyone. But intellectually, it's time for y'all to get hit in the mouth. Brittany, the developer, said, "We can't be surprised." She's talking about the clip. Most of us, I'm reading it exactly how she wrote it now. Most of us has ancestry tied to them folks. Them folks. Why? She says, question mark. Because they used to, she said, because they used to, not because, but because they used to assault our ancestors, our other ancestors. So with no comma, she says, so I bet all of us would find something similar, unfortunately. It is unfortunate for anyone black today to have had an ancestor on the Mayflower. That is unfortunate. Because you shouldn't want to have any of your DNA tied up with them folks. That's what she says. We're going to move on. I just use this for inspiration. Mind you, they're talking about Angela Davis. Angela Davis. Let's go. This guy here, if I can find him. If I can't find him, I'll just, let's see. Bear with me, y'all. Again, I am trying to provoke. This is not trolling or anything silly like that. But if you want to get an education, come over here. Oh, that's why I do. That's why his name didn't pop up, because I didn't put the @ sign. Okay, Mr. Official Hennessy. Now this guy here, let's see. Mind you, y'all, I'm just this. I just want y'all to know what's going on out here and what's being said. But I know y'all know. I apologize again. What's up, Chris? I apologize again if I'm tagging people that aren't really these folks. I'm trying to remember what the avatar photos look like. Someone named Official Hennessy, public profile with 4,479 followers, said, I mean, many black Americans have a 20 to 30% European background due to rape. So yeah, we all got some of that Mayflower blood with a sad face emoji. Some of us got that Mayflower blood, and this should make you sad. Because of rape, she says, rape. Was that the case in every instance? Was it always rape? Is that why some black folk have European ancestry? Was because of rape? That's interesting. If that's the case, I wonder who was raping who. Okay. We're going to move on. Again, I am so sorry if I accidentally tagged the wrong person. Hey, what's up, little bro? Stay in here for this one, man. And if you don't stay in here for this one, little bro, I'm going to send this to you because I really want you to see this, especially considering what you're about to go into career-wise, young brother. That's my young brother, y'all, in the comment section with the same last name as me. That's my actual biological brother. She says, Mrs. M1SSJ, you can, and when I went to her page, in her bio, read the line, you can jail the revolutionary, but you can't jail the revolution with the black fist. Her comment in the shade room, under the reel of Angela Davis discovering that she had an ancestor on the Mayflower, she says her page is public, has 1,517 posts and 2,153 followers. Says, my good sis said, nah, son, I don't F with them green bean casserole makers. That's what she said. I don't know. Have you ever had green bean casserole? I have. I think it's pretty tasty. But nevertheless, I guess green bean casserole is just something white folk make. She said, nah, son, I don't fool with them. Now, this gentleman here, Fuel for the Body, very interesting Instagram page. He appears to be a chef of sorts. Looks pretty talented, pretty successful young man. Has a lot of followers. He's a big deal. 104,000 followers, right? Public Instagram page, big deal. This guy says, Angela Davis was my professor. She was a brilliant, amazing, and humble woman. That's what he says. Another young lady, Tay Doll. One of these days, y'all, like I said, I'm going fishing and I'm trying to provoke. I'm going fishing. Maybe I'll catch something one day. Tay Doll, small private page, but I thought her comment was interesting. She only has 100 followers, probably new to Instagram. She says, I wish they'd do a biopic on her. She is a legend. One of my favorite people to do a blog on, with hearts and heart eye emojis. And lastly, let me get, and this is the last, and now I'm gonna get into what I came to talk about. Like I say, this kind of stuff here, y'all, is just motivation. Now, she's a really, really big deal. I don't know how to pronounce that, fitness. She got 174,000 followers, y'all. She says, it's okay, Sister Angela. You have paid your dues and then some, with 2 black fists. Not 1, but 2. Most black people in America has a white grandma from their past. So Angela Davis done paid her dues and then some. And it was all like that throughout the comment section. I didn't see not one substantive remark with regard to the life and legacy of Angela Davis. One dude said something I thought was interesting. He was the only guy who said something even remotely thought-provoking. He said, what y'all look like appears to be a black man from the avatar photo. He says, what y'all gonna learn soon enough is that some of y'all's ancestors wasn't even slaves while y'all doing all this fighting. But nevertheless, all I saw were black fists, power to the people. It's okay, sis. Don't worry about it. You chose what side you wanted to be on. You this, you that. And then, of course, people were making jokes about her skin tone. Saying, look at Angela Davis. I mean, what would you expect? Of course, she got some white ancestors. She high yellow. But Angela Davis, she didn't want no parts of that. She didn't want to hear of it. I just thought because I thought that was interesting, y'all. I just wanted to start out with that brief little because what I came to talk about here today, again, I talked about them before because to speak of Angela Davis, I talked about the Black Panther Party before and how the deeds of the Black Panther Party were interconnected and tied into the flowering and the burgeoning of black feminism in the 1970s. And I titled, it was part 1 and part 2, I titled them Dark Side of the Black Panther Party, which is a bit misleading in a sense, because to say that there is a dark side to the Black Panther Party is to imply that there is a light side. I don't want to go back and change the title now. It is what it is. It's not a big deal. But there is no light side to the Black Panther Party, and that's what I came here to talk about. America's Viet Cong and the politics of murder. What are we talking about when we're talking about the Black Panther Party? And why have I referred to them as America's Viet Cong? We're going to talk about it. And the reason why I just felt the need to bring up Angela Davis was because she was not an official member of the Black Panther Party, but she was somewhat of a fellow traveler. She would say herself that sometimes she was a member, sometimes she was not. She pretty much preferred the kind of non-committal fluidity that came along with being politically independent. She didn't really feel the need to belong to a group. But, you know, a lot of times Angela Davis is mistakenly referred to as a member of the Black Panther Party, although technically or formally she was not. But that's why I brought up Angela Davis, because she goes, you know, she's in the milieu, in the whole basket of deplorables, to quote Hillary Clinton. She's in that basket of deplorables. That's why I talked about her. So let's get into the Black Panther Party, because aside from, I didn't focus on black feminism as much, but I want to talk about the Black Panther Party and their deeds and what the Black Panther Party was really all about. We're going to close out Black History Month with a bang, y'all. Please ride with me. There's a man by the name of Omali Yefshatala. Omali Yefshatala. If I'm mispronouncing that, I don't give a damn. His born name was Joseph Waller. He was born October 9th in 1941. He is the founder and chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, also known as the Uhuru Movement. Last time I checked, I think he's still the leader and chairman, the Uhuru Movement, Amala Yefshatala. Anytime you get one of these fools with this, you know, with some European name, and then they turn around and change their name into something more African sounding, you know you're dealing with a clown. I'm going to begin this talk with a quote from Omali Yefshatali. He said in a speech, don't know when, don't know where, don't know the year, not important. It's the sentiment. Listen closely. You have, this is Shatali, Yefshatala. You have the emergence in human society of this thing that's called the state. What is the state? The state is this organized democracy. It is the police department. It is the army, the Navy. It is the prison system, the courts, and what have you. This is the state. It is a repressive organization. But the state, he says, you know, you've got to have the police, because if there were no police, then look at what you'd be doing to yourselves. You'd be killing yourselves if there were no police. But the reality is, this is the reality according to Yefshatala, that the police become necessary in human society only at that junction in human society where there is strife between those who have and those who ain't got. Understand what he just said. Because, see, this goes back. This goes back to the original assertion of the left. You see, as opposed to the original sin of man, as the Bible describes, the left has its own sort of cosmology or theology. And according to the theological dictates of the left, the original sin of man was the conception of private property. The proclamation or the advent of private property as a concept was the original sin of man, because it was the principle of private property that led to man's alienation. It is what led to his alienation from his state of perfection. You see, without social inequity, there would be no need for law enforcement. Why? Because no one would feel the need to steal from another man, because we'd all be the same. Because once upon a time, we shared things communally. So you have to understand, for those of you who, and I know you all get it, and I'm preaching to the choir when it comes to most, but for those of you who don't understand, This is why there is this hatred for law enforcement, because law enforcement embodies the authority of the state. And the state, according to Yev Shatala, is a repressive organization. The state keeps in place the social and economic hierarchy that is, of course, predicated upon exploitation. Because that is what the abuse of the human language means when you start talking about capitalism. That's what you're talking about. You're casting a spell on reality itself. And that's the point. So that is why the left abhors. This is why they find police and law enforcement objectionable. Because one's actions in life are not driven by his own individual will and conscience. It's sort of like, the old Gnostics believed that the source of sin was matter. And the soul's purpose is to escape from the clutches of matter. The Hindus have their own version or concept or word that they use to describe the illusion that is the physical realm. They refer to it as the realm of Maya. I believe that's what it's called. Pardon me to all my Hindus if I'm getting your religion wrong. But matter is the veil of illusion. But St. Augustine would come along, and I consider Augustine right below Paul in terms of the greatest Christian teachers in human history. And Augustine suggests that matter was created by God, thus matter cannot inherently be wicked. Matter, according to Augustine, is not the source of sin. The source of sin, according to Augustine, is man's abuse of his free will. Behavior, according to the left, is never the object or the result of a man's will. Which leads us to, I don't know, are you all familiar with the Black Panther Party's 10-point program? Have you ever read it? Marx and Engels would have their own 10-point program paradigm that they implemented, that they talked about. Go and read Marx and Engels' 10-point plan, and then go and read the Black Panther Party's 10-point plan, and you just sort of line them up. I especially like the Black Panther Party's 10-point plan, point 8 and point 9. Point 8, when they talk about police, and point 9, how they demand the release of all black prisoners in federal prisons, state prisons, and county jails. Because no black prisoner, according to the Black Panthers, was given a fair trial. So I just wanted to start that off. Amala Yev Shatala, a.k.a. Joseph Waller. Now, I'm going to bring up a man named Genet. Right? I don't speak French. If you read it, right, more of an Anglophone pronunciation. If you look at it, and you try to pronounce it phonetically, you would probably pronounce it Genet. Genet. But the popular pronunciation of this man's name is Jean Genet. Who is Jean Genet? Are you familiar with Jean Genet? Well, he was a Frenchman, and it is key because France is the centerpiece of where a lot of this foolishness originates and where it all kind of comes. If you ask some philosophers and historians where the origins of the modern left begin, some take it all the way back to Plato's Republic. This is what Plato was a socialist in here. I don't want to muddy up the waters too much, but we'll just sort of start at France just for a second, because a lot of the political understandings all across the Western world, it began in late 18th century France. The very term and the very concept of left and right began in France with the general estate of France in 1789, because the nobility would sit to the right of the king, and the general estate would sit to the left of the king, and so that became known as left and right. But in order to understand what leftism is, it is simple, because the Jacobins or the Jacobins, they would clamor like the left today clamors for, which is social justice. And to the Jacobins, what social justice meant, or how to implement social justice, was, of course, to appropriate the authority and the power of the state to, right the wrongs or root out the source of social inequality. The leading or the basic fundamental premise of the left has been the same since the days of the Jacobins. It has not changed. Again, our very concept of left and right comes from France. So let me go to Jean Genet. And it's going to be a lot of synchronicity here because it's funny how all these things tend to work out and how all these things tend to go together. What's up, G? What up, Greg? What's up, family? What's up, Pastor? Got my pastor in the house. I hope he keep listening. Who is Jean Genet? Jean Genet was born December 19th in 1910 in Paris, France. He died April 15th in 1986 in Paris, France. Who was Jean Genet? He was a French criminal and social outcast turned writer who, as a novelist, transformed erotic and often obscene subject matter into a poetic vision of the universe, and as a dramatist, became a leading figure in the avant-garde theater, especially the theater of the absurd. Genet, or Genet, was a rebel and an anarchist, and the most extreme sort. He rejected almost all forms of social discipline or political commitment. The violent and often degraded eroticism of his experience led him to a concept he coined mystic humiliation. Now, go back 2 talks ago, and I talked a lot when I brought up a lot of the figures in the sexual revolution, from Eric Wilhelm Reich to Harry Hay. And there's always been this obsession amongst the ranks of the leading left-wing, either activists, theoreticians, philosophers, etc. There's always been an obsession amongst them with the occult. And when you hear me, what I've just read, it's very cryptic, very occult-like language. Okay? Now, why am I bringing up Jean Genet and why is he significant? Jean Genet came to the United States in 1970 to engage in a public relations campaign to try to garner sympathy from the American public for that of Bobby Seale. Bobby Seale, for those of you who don't know, was the co-founder of the Black Panther Party. He was the second in command of the Black Panther Party. We're going to get into some of that. At this particular time in 1970, Bobby Seale was on trial for the murder of a fellow Panther by the name of Alex Rackley, and I'm going to get into the details. But Jean Genet came to the U.S. because he wanted to do a profile on the Black Panther Party. Jean Genet, for his time, was what Marquis de Sade was for his time in France. If you all don't know who Marquis de Sade was, boy, Marquis de Sade was the Larry Flint. He was the Hugh Hefner of his time. Maybe even worse. Marquis de Sade was pretty much an 18th century pornographer who was he was one of the key figures, one of the key philosophical figures that led to the French Revolution. Because again, sexual freedom or sexual revolution and the politics of the left go hand in hand. We know that from Wilhelm Reich going all the way back, again, to Marquis de Sade. Jean Genet wrote an article in Ramparts magazine. I'm going to get to Ramparts because Ramparts magazine plays a key role in everything that went on with the Black Panther Party and some of its key members. He wrote an article in Ramparts titled Here and Now for Bobby Seale. Now, Jean Genet, you got to understand, didn't speak a lick of English. You can go and actually watch some of his interviews on YouTube or whatever social media platform you like to do your streaming from, and you can see some of his interviews when he came to the United States to speak up on behalf of the Black Panther Party. But what I also find interesting about Jean Genet, and he went while he was here, he spoke at Yale, Columbia City College, etc. One of the men that Jean Genet influenced, although they were pretty much contemporaries, another man who Jean Genet influenced or sort of inspired was a man by the name of Jean-Paul Sartre. or Jean-Paul Sartre. I don't know how the French say Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre. But y'all know who Jean-Paul Sartre is, don't you? If you haven't seen him, if you just do a Google image of Jean-Paul Sartre, let me warn you, that's one of the most ugliest motherfuckers I've ever seen. But Jean-Paul Sartre was another sick, twisted individual. Sick, twisted man. There's another French intellectual, and this is what I want to say about Jean Genet. And Jean Genet would suggest it, and this is what led to Genet's affinity for the Black Panther Party, because Jean Genet and Jean-Paul Sartre viewed the criminal as a quote, this is a quote, as a quote, primitive revolutionary. A primitive revolutionary, especially or particularly the black criminal, because criminality was the only resourceful political or revolutionary outlet for the criminal. So the criminal is acting out on behalf or acting out on the basis that they are in fact an oppressed or a political, they're being put upon politically, if that makes sense. So again, you have a lot of this highbrow kind of stuff, right? This is coming from, white intellectuals who are granting their imprimatur on black criminality. It gets deeper. There's another, I believe this man was French as well. He's another French intellectual who was a icon of the left. Another sick, twisted individual by the name of Albert Camus. He just simply goes by the name Camus. If you all don't know who Camus is, look up Albert Camus. And there's another Frenchman who happens to be black, who is a key figure in leftist philosophy in the 20th century. And that man, many of you are probably familiar with him, is a man by the name of Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon. All of these men, from Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and Frantz Fanon, were all philosophical favorites of none other than your boy Huey P. Newton himself. And I'm going to explain that, and we're going to get to that. So while Jean Genet was visiting the United States in 1970, the New York Times published a piece on May 1st, 1970, on May Day. This article was written by John Darton. He quotes John Darton, in his 1970 article. He says, "They are the edge of the knife," they meaning the Black Panther Party, "and the rest of the country is butter. And the butter is trying to cut the knife. It's a brutal, violent country which has the nerve to preach nonviolence to blacks. Whites do not have the impression of living in a fascist country, but blacks do. They live it every day." So here's this man, Jean Genet, indicting the United States. He didn't speak a lick of English. And before he even arrived to the United States, he had never met Bobby Seale nor any members of the Black Panther Party in person, nor had they met him. I found a clip of Genet back in 1970 saying during an interview that the Black Panther Party is the only true revolutionary group in America. Jean Genet gave a speech during the May Day celebration, and I'm going to read an excerpt from his speech. Genet says in his May Day speech, "We often hear the Black Panther Party speak of fascism." There's that word. I advise y'all to go check out my video, my talk on fascism, America's Boogeyman. He says, "We often hear the Black Panther Party speak of fascism, and whites have difficulty accepting the word. That's because whites have to make a great effort of imagination to understand that blacks live under an oppressive fascist regime." This is a white man talking like this. "This fascism, for them, is not the doing of the American government alone." Well, whose is it, Genet? He says, "but also the entire white community, which in reality is very privileged." Did y'all see the firestorm that the creator of the comic strip Dilbert, y'all see the firestorm he ignited by telling white folks to get the fuck away from black people? His words, get the fuck away from them. Due to the results of a recent Rasmussen poll, which claims in its findings that nearly half of black people don't think it's okay to be white. My man, John, his name was Scott Adams is his name. He said, man, I've tried to bridge the gap. I've tried to do my best to try and help black folk. I can't do no more. If you got half of the people, this is a quote of Scott Adams, if half the people in a group don't like another group, that's a hate group. That's a hate group. But here's Genet fanning these flames in 1970. He every bit of white. Let me explain something too while I have you here. Because the very concept, understand, notice what I just said. He said that white people as a whole in the United States are privileged. So when you hear folks talk about white privilege and this carrying on, this did not become a part of the popular political lexicon over the last 5 to 10 years. This was popular back then. Because the new left of the 1960s, which was born in California, now that's key because we're going to talk about how the relocation, because prior to the old left, you can say, if you wanted to just put a geographical home to it in the United States, you could say the home of the old left was New York City. The home of the new left became the Oakland, Berkeley region of California, the San Francisco Bay Area of California. Because the campus itself of UC Berkeley, which they claim is the birthplace of the free speech movement, no, it is the reemergence of the communist movement in America. That's what UC Berkeley was. And the student body became a very important contingent of the new left. And I'm going to talk about why that geographical location is key. But when the new left came about in the 1960s, they began to usher in and believe in this concept that the United States was headed towards a race war. Black leftists believed this and the white ones alike. The black leftists at the time tied their liberation to the various liberation movements in the third world. I call this third worldism. This is when the left became obsessed with the goings-on in Vietnam and in Cuba. Things looked a little bit different on the world stage in the 1960s. You got to understand something. And the white radicals believe that in order for whites to make up for their white skin privilege, they must become a fifth column in the United States and fight in the race war on behalf of blacks, under their directive, meaning the directive of the black revolutionary. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Symbionese army. The Symbionese army was headed up by a black man. I forgot his real name. I think his name was Sin-K something. Of course, Sin-K named after the famous African who rebelled on the slave ship Amistad. But all of his subordinates were white. The members of the Symbionese army were all white. And remember, they famously kidnapped that one woman, and she ended up becoming a member of the Symbionese army. She developed Stockholm syndrome and became one of them. The Symbionese army, predominantly white, famously assassinated a black city official in Oakland, who was the newly elected superintendent of schools in Oakland. They had him assassinated. They took credit for it because they wrote a letter to the press claiming responsibility for the death of the newly elected superintendent of schools in the city of Oakland. And the reason why they assassinated him because of his plan to implement an ID system, because he wanted to try to cut down on the truancy and the violence that was occurring throughout Oakland schools. It was white revolutionaries that assassinated this black man. Here, back to Genet. This is continuing with his speech. Here, whites are not directly oppressed, but blacks are, in their minds and sometimes in their bodies. Black people are right to accuse whites as a whole of this oppression. So Genet is saying blacks have a right to accuse whites as a whole. They are right to speak of fascism. he ends his May Day speech. And if you want to read the entire May Day speech, it's online. You can go and read it. Jean Genet, Jeangenet. Hope I spelled that right. Jeangenet. He ends his speech with this line. Bobby Seale's life depends on you. He's talking about the American people. And your real life depends on the Black Panther Party. This is why I titled this, and this is going to be the title when I put it on YouTube, America's Vietcong. Because the Black Panther Party was the tip of the spear for the New Left. And you're going to find out what the Black Panther Party was doing behind the scenes if you don't know, and why they operated with virtual impunity, and why they are still lionized as heroes in American culture today. Charles R. Gary was quoted in that same article. Y'all know who Charles R. Gary is? Charles R. Gary was a lawyer to many members of the Black Panther Party. He was sort of like one of their, he was the lawyer of the Black Panther Party. He defended Huey, I believe, maybe even in all of Huey's legal run-ins. Charles R. Gary was a part of his legal team. Charles R. Gary says of Mr. Genet or Genet, he idolizes them, and they think he's out of sight. He's a real revolutionary. Charles R. Gary, Charles R., last name spelled Garry. Look up Charles R. Gary. What a lowlife. What a despicable man Charles R. Gary was. Charles R. Gary would admit as well that Huey P. Newton, contrary to what you may think, loved when he got all white juries because he knew that he can play on their ignorance. Because see, when you from the hood, when you from the street like me, when you from the D, when you like, I'm not gonna sit around here and play like I'm Bumpy Johnson or somebody. But let me tell you something. I've been there and I've seen things. And only a privileged life would have you believe that black people are oppressed because of some no. You got to be privileged in order to be that stupid. Because there's some kind of intellectual ignorance that kind of life gives you. Not all the time, but I'm simply saying, only someone of privilege can be this stupid. I know better. Because I know some cats right now, blacker than the ace of spades, to quote Jesse Lee Peterson, who don't give a damn about none of that political stuff we up here talking about. They will kill you just as quick as look at you. I'm not playing with y'all. I know that. Listen to me. Don't care nothing about what you talking about. And Huey knew that white middle-class liberals would believe the lie that he was some oppressed revolutionary. He knew black folk wasn't going to fall for it. Charles R. Gary was also the lawyer for Jim Jones. That's all you need to know about him. Jim Jones, and I said this before, and I know a lot of you probably already know, Jim Jones, for all of my Shade Room watchers, y'all know who Jim Jones is, yeah. Angela Davis was real fond of Jim Jones. They exchanged letters on several occasions. You can go and read the letters that Angela Davis wrote to Jim Jones in support of his church organization. For those of you who Angela Davis did what she had to do for the black cause. Okay. So let's get to the background of the Black Panther Party a little bit before we really get into the meat of this. Huey Newton met Bobby Seale in 1961 at Merritt College, where both of them would join the Afro-American Association, a black cultural organization led by a man named Donald Worden. Now, some of you who do your research, who know a lot of the folks and the facts and the figures from back then are probably familiar with Donald Worden. He's a piece of work. Donald Worden was pretty much Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale's, one of their key mentors. They looked up to Donald Worden. But of course, Donald Worden, I suppose, wasn't radical enough, which led to the eventual Well, you know what ended up happening. We're going to get to it, but I'm trying to run through this. It was at Merritt College where Huey P. Newton, specifically, and Bobby Seale would, of course, learn Marxism. They learned Marxism at Merritt College. I think I may have said this when I was on my friend Chad O. Jackson's YouTube channel. And I know some of you who have been to, I know guys who went to college who was just as street and just as thugged out as the dudes who didn't go. They just so happened to be smart enough to graduate from high school and just went to college as par for the course. They were just there for the college experience. Some dudes went to college, man, just to sell dope. Because if y'all don't know, and I know y'all know, the market, the underground drug market on a college campus is like, dawg, I got what you need. I can hook up. Holla if you hear me. For real, I'm telling for real. I know dudes who were there just to sell dope. I know dudes who ain't do nothing but sit around and get high all day. My own boy, I got no cat from Chicago. I was my dog, smoke weed all the time. Then the college I went to, he used to make fun of me all the time. He used to call me Nellyville because he said I look like the rapper Nelly. Don't laugh, y'all. I don't look nothing like Nelly. I certainly don't look like him now because I done lost my hair since then. But he used to call me Nellyville. My homeboy used to smoke weed all day. You got a lot of cats who went to college don't belong there. But Huey P. Newton was a street tough. Him and Bobby Seale, they went to college and they found Marxism. They were also heavily influenced by a man named James Foreman. Look James Foreman up if you're familiar with the civil. Again, if you know, you know. To quote Pusha T, if you know, you know. James Foreman. I think this is the James Foreman. Story goes that Eldridge Cleaver held a gun to James Foreman's head and forced him to play Russian roulette. The gun wasn't loaded, unbeknownst to Foreman, but this is said to have terrorized Foreman so much that he permanently backed away from the Black Panther Party and was never the same, or never had another. He didn't have a serious presence in politics again from that point forward because he was so terrified at how radical and extreme the so-called civil rights movement had become when he thought that he was almost murdered by Eldridge Cleaver. Did I say Seale held a gun? No, it's Eldridge Cleaver that held a gun to his head and forced him to play Russian roulette, if I said it wrong. He was also influenced by Stokely Carmichael, head of SNCC, and I think the later head of SNCC, H. Rap Brown. So here you had Foreman, Stokely, and H. Rap Brown were all heavily influenced Huey P. Newton, and of course, Bobby Seale. And of course, you know, there would be a disconnect because I think at one point, again, Stokely Carmichael, he, like Angela Davis, is associated with the Black Panther Party, but he was never officially a member. But in the early days, there was a lot of collaboration because I think Stokely Carmichael held a position as their prime minister or something to that effect, but he would eventually step down due to internal feuding and fighting and so on and so forth, because one of the key ideological differences between the Black Panther Party and a lot of the difference between the Black Panther Party and a lot of their black revolutionary counterparts was the fact that the Black Panther Party rejected what they referred to as cultural supremacy. They believed in staying true to Marx's true vision, which was, of course, the unification of the working class. They believed uniting with all folks who were revolutionary and not just blacks. Okay? So this would put Stokely and men like Maulana Karanga at logheads with members of the Black Panther Party, and this, of course, culminated in a showdown between the Black Panther Party and Maulana Karanga's faction, of course, which led to the death, of course, of Bunchy Carter and John Huggins. Okay. So yeah, so Stokely Carmichael and again Angela Davis. Again, they're like if y'all familiar with rap music, they're like the Capadanas of the Wu-Tang Clan. It's like Capadonna, he ain't a member, he wasn't one of the original 9, but it's like, you know, he like the 10th honorary member, but Capadonna ain't officially a member of the Wu-Tang Clan, but he always was like there. That probably went over a lot of y'all heads because y'all like, who the hell is, y'all don't know nothing about the Wu-Tang Clan. Okay. Around the same time, Newton would also meet a white UC Berkeley radical named Robert Scheer. Now, reason why Robert Scheer is so important, and I'm going to get into the geographical influences, because Robert Scheer believed that part of what did the old left in was the old left was too intellectual bougie. That's my description, because that's how I understand it, for Robert Scheer's taste. Robert Scheer believed that the culture should be sort of like in the spirit of Antonio Gramsci, that the culture should be infiltrated, even though we know that there were communists in Hollywood as far back, of course, as the 40s, 50s, and what have you, right? I talked about Lucille Ball before and James Cagney and others. There were all sorts of men singers, Paul Robeson, Woody Guthrie. I can go on down the line of a lot of the figures in entertainment who were out about their communism and what have you. And there's even, ladies and gentlemen, this was never proven, as a matter of fact, and it was the California legislature that did a ton in trying to get to the bottom of what was actually going on in Hollywood. I forgot the name of the man who testified before the California state legislature that, he dropped names, and amongst the names that he dropped, who he said met up at these communist meetings and what have you, these learning seminars, was none other than, here's looking at you, kid, himself of Maltese Falcon and Casablanca fame, none other than Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart too has connections to the Communist Party. He would deny it, and it was never definitively proven, but there was an air of suspicion swirling around the head of Humphrey Bogart. Of course, all of the goings-on in Hollywood at the time helped change the future, and perhaps the future not of the country, but of the world. It helped change that because one man was in Hollywood at the time and saw what was going on in Hollywood, and it changed his life. And that, of course, is none other than Ronald Reagan, the actor turned politician, the actor turned governor turned president. He saw it with his own eyes. He said, oh, hell no. Ronald Reagan was a part of the FDR coalition. A lot of conservative, or soon-to-be conservatives, were a part of the FDR voting coalition. And once FDR went soft on Joseph Stalin, and when FDR was made a fool of after the conference at Yalta, when Joseph Stalin, or Uncle Joe, as FDR affectionately referred to him as, refused to relinquish his control over Eastern Europe, a lot of FDR Democrats became Eisenhower Republicans, and these became known as neocons. See, y'all say this shit today. Y'all be like, man, them neocons and rhinos, and y'all say the term neocon is as old as at least the 1950s, when a lot of FDR Democrats and Truman Democrats were becoming Republicans, due in large part to the Democrat Party's softening towards the Soviet Union. These became known as the neocons. They were new conservatives. Also, this is also the result of, again, y'all know about MAGA and all this stuff, and we look at the counterculture of the 1960s, where there was a counter to the counterculture of the 1960s, and that was a conservative resurgence, okay, at the time, that's referred to now as the Goldwater Revolution. So you had the Goldwater Revolution and you had the counterculture going on at the same time. See, the left would have you believe that, they was just doing that. They was the left. The left took over the culture in the 1960s, and they did to some extent. But understand that there was a counter to the counter coming by way of American politics, thanks in large part to the Goldwater Revolution of the 1960s, which eventually led to, 15 years later, the 1980 election of Ronald Reagan, who should have won the nomination in 1970. But it was, of course, given to Gerald Ford. And Ronald Reagan famously made a concession speech during the Republican National Convention when Ford was given the nomination, and everyone who heard Reagan's speech, his impromptu speech, giving his support for Gerald Ford, said at that moment, they knew they nominated the wrong guy. So Reagan knew what was going on in Hollywood because he was there. He knew, and that's why he found out how dangerous communism was, because he was in Hollywood and he saw it. Back to the Black Panthers. That's my little diatribe, or my tangents that I say. But Hollywood is very crucial, very important, because again, the New Left began in Berkeley, California. So it was in close proximity to the film industry. So understand, the left had huge support from Hollywood. And you're going to find out, and I'm going to drop some names of some folk that you probably are unfamiliar with. Because one of the reasons why Huey P. Newton and his criminal gang known as the Black Panther Party was able to get away with what they were able to get away with is because they had protection, not only from academia and the media, but they had protection from Hollywood. And I'm going to get to it if y'all just stick with me. Let me talk about Huey a little bit more. So there was an incident that led to a fight. Now, this was sort of like the beginning of the Black Panther Party. There was a fight between Bobby Seale, Huey P. Newton, and police when Bobby Seale was reciting poetry on a sidewalk and was approached by a police officer who told him that he was under arrest for obstructing the sidewalk or being a public nuisance or what have you. And of course, an argument ensued, and then a fight ensued, which led to Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton's arrest. Bobby Seale was quoting poems that was written by radical left-wing poets. I forgot some of the name of the poets, but anyway, he enticed the police to engage them in a hostile encounter because he was reciting poetry that contained epithets and words like "motherfuck the police." And the story goes that Bobby Seale was saying it so loudly that it garnered the attention of people who were passing by. And this, of course, evoked or brought forth the attention of the officer, because he was intentionally provoking the officer to speak to him because he was saying things like "motherfuck the police" in this poem that he was reciting at the request of Huey P. Newton, because Huey P. Newton would often ask Bobby Seale to recite poetry because Bobby Seale was a bit of a performer. Bobby Seale was a more affluent and a better public speaker than Huey P. Newton was. A little bit of inside baseball, if you don't know this about Huey P. Newton, was always insecure about his height and about his stature. And he was always insecure about his voice. If you ever heard Huey P. Newton speak, he's very soft-spoken. He has a very soft voice. And he was always insecure about his voice. And he never quite liked to speak in public. This is why Eldridge Cleaver, who would eventually become the Minister of Information, and Bobby Seale, who was the chairman, they were the two titular intellectual heads of the Black Panther Party, even though Huey P. Newton was probably more intellectually inclined than the both of them, because Huey P. Newton was interested in all sorts of philosophical materials as far back as his teenage years, but he always had a trouble reading. This is probably what hampered him educationally, but he had the perseverance to kind of push through, and he would still do his best to learn and read the works of some of these philosophers and historians and intellectuals, even though he had trouble reading. So Huey was the intellectual, and Bobby Seale was the more extroverted character. But Huey was always jealous of Seale in that regard because Seale was taller, he was older, he was more physically imposing, he had a deeper voice, and he was more well-spoken. But the flip side of that, Bobby Seale looked up to Huey because Huey was more intense, more militant, more angry, and he could fight. Huey was a better fighter. And in that instance, when Bobby Seale was harangued by police, Huey jumped in to defend Seale and started beating up the police. And from that moment, Seale says, and he's quoted as saying, "I knew from that moment I would never go anywhere or find myself getting into anything without my brother, without this man, because I know this man got my back." But did he have your back, Bobby? We're going to find out. It's a little bit of background on the Black Panther Party. And so that prompted them to want to start this organization, because shortly after they bailed out of jail, there was another gentleman, the story goes, who they believed was arrested around the same area, because there's a stretch. There's a stretch from the campus of UC Berkeley to Merritt College, and you go further along. I can't really describe the geographical particulars of it, but the Oakland ghetto and UC Berkeley are not far from one another geographically, right? And so a lot of things would go down along this one particular strip. And there was another incident where a man was accosted by police and arrested, and it was Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton that put the money together to bail this man out of jail. And the story goes that the man was so thankful to Seale and Newton that he broke down in tears and thanked them. This, the story goes, is what prompted Huey and Seale to contemplate starting a new civil rights organization. And the rest, they say, is history. On January 1st, 1967, the Black Panther Party opened its first official headquarters in a storefront on 56th and Grove Streets in Oakland, California. To sum it up, by the 1970s, the Panthers had become an important force in Oakland politics, gaining membership on various community and anti-poverty boards. They controlled patronage programs funded by the federal and state governments and won recognition as an important power broker within the state Democratic Party. Bobby Seale even finished a credible second in a race to become mayor. During the mayoral campaign, just as an aside, one of Bobby Seale's bodyguards had shot and murdered a paper boy. The media largely ignored it. Bobby Seale, running for mayor, finishing second, eventually paved the way for the election of the city's first black mayor. And the city's first black mayor, whose name escapes me, was pretty much elected thanks to the community organizing power of the one-time leader of the Black Panther Party, none other than Elaine Brown. And I'm going to cover Elaine Brown in this talk as well. Elaine Brown was close buddies with your boy, Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown, the Jerry Brown, who, of course, had an ongoing thing with Heels Up Harris, cackling Kamala. And Dianne Feinstein and Ron Dellums, all these guys and gals. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the symbol, the blueprint for American inner city politics. This, I wrote this down here just so I wouldn't forget to say it exactly like this. This is the foundation of the corruption of inner city politics. This is the Democrat Party inner city machine. It's ran by gangsters. It began in the 1960s with the passage of the 1964 and 1965 Voting Rights Act, 1964 Civil Rights Act, and 1965 Voting Rights Act, and it is still going on today. The gangsterification of American politics in our inner cities that is ran completely by one party. The gangsters on the street were able to bully and intimidate the public into supporting the politicians that would allow them to operate with impunity. Make no mistake about it, the Democrat Party still functions like that today. Say, if you want to get elected, sir, you need me. You go to the gangster. You go to the community organizer who has the ear in the hearts of the community, because they going to do what I say. They not going to listen to you. They don't give a damn about politics. What's going on in the street? They going to do what I say. But if you want me to get the niggas in the hood to vote for you, what you going to do for me? It's a hustle. Politics became a hustle. It became a hustle to the gangster. Huey P. Newton was a hustler. Now, let's talk about the murder of Officer John Frey. Y'all familiar with that? John Frey's last name is spelled F-R-E-Y. So it looks like free. A lot of times I hear people pronounce his name, they pronounce it Frey. So I'll pronounce it Frey. I'm not sure if it's Frey or Frey, John Frey. We'll just say Frey, John Frey. Y'all know, y'all familiar with the murder of John Frey. The murder of John Frey. Let me detail it for you. On October 28, 1967, Officer John Frey made a traffic stop on a vehicle with multiple outstanding warrants. When the officer discovered that neither the driver nor his male passenger were the registered owners of the vehicle, he requested additional assistance. Officer Herbert Haynes responded as the driver was pulled from the vehicle. A struggle erupted between Frey and the suspect, wherein gunshots soon rang out. Officer Haynes was hit, along with Officer Frey, who was shot several times as well. Haynes fired at the suspect, hitting him in the abdomen. The driver and his passenger fled on foot, commandeered a passing vehicle at gunpoint, and forced the motorist to help them escape. The wound being too severe, the suspect, once safely away from the scene, was taken to a hospital by a friend. While there, the driver was arrested for the murder of Officer Frey and the attempted murder of Officer Haynes. The driver was Huey P. Newton. Now, this was the episode that transformed Huey P. Newton into a folk hero. This began it all. The shooting of Officer Frey. Despite witness testimony, the key witness in the state's case was a black bus driver. He was black. Despite witness testimony and physical evidence, the prosecution struggled to convince a jury that Newton had murdered Frey and could only reach a manslaughter conviction. In response, the Panthers incited the Free Huey campaign that found ready support amongst a collective of students, anti-war activists, black power groups, disaffected minorities, and a host of other leftist organizations. Newton was released from prison just 3 years later when his conviction was overturned on appeal due to a technicality. What's the technicality, Chuck? I didn't feel the need to go into detail. It's something dealing with how the judge gave improper instructions to the jury and what have you. You can go look into and get into the meat of the John Frey or the Huey P. Newton case if you like. I just wanted to make the point that Huey P. Newton was eventually released. His conviction was eventually overturned, and he was acquitted of the murder of John Frey. Newton publicly maintained his innocence until shortly before his death, when it is rumored that he finally admitted to a close friend that he intentionally killed Officer Frey. Now, whether he intentionally killed him or not, or whether it was merely self-defense, an accident, we don't quite know, but wink, wink, we do know. Because if you believe the bull that they tell you, then I don't know what else to tell you. Let me show you all something. What's this here? Let me put it up to the camera. That book there, this book here, should I say? This book here was written by Ward Churchill and Jim Vander Wall. The book title is The COINTELPRO Papers, Documents from the FBI's Secret War Against Dissidents in the United States. The COINTELPRO Papers. This is the seminal work on the FBI's counterintelligence operation. Many people who still to this day give cover and make excuse for the Black Panther Party cite the COINTELPRO program. Many of them who cite the COINTELPRO program have not read this book. I've been in possession of this book for over 20 years. I even let one of my professors, Dr. Dawn Hinton, borrow it some years ago. How you doing, Dr. Hinton? Boy, have I come a long way. I don't know if you see me today, if you would be proud or if you would be sad. I think you might be sad. Because I got a lot of my leftist bona fides when I was a young idiot from you. I love you, Dr. Hinton, but boy, oh boy, did you put me on the wrong path. Remember when I let you borrow this book? I was letting professors borrow books. That's how much reading and stuff I used to do and studying I used to do. But here's the COINTELPRO papers. You can read them. I ain't even gonna go into it. I ain't got time for it. But if you're interested, here it is. I just want y'all to see that I didn't just fall out the sky. I done came a ways. The COINTELPRO papers. Because everything was the FBI's fault. It was all the CIA. It was all a setup. Bullshit. This ain't church. This ain't church. Let me reiterate. I'm sorry. Now, let's talk about the case of Eldridge God, I can't speak today, y'all. I'm sorry. Eldridge Cleaver in the death of Robert Hutton. I know y'all familiar with this. This was the first Hands Up, Don't Shoot. This was before Michael Brown. I'm going to talk about the death of Lil Bobby. This is what he went by. Lil Bobby was the Black Panther Party's first recruit. This is why he's well known, because of how he met his end and the fact that he was the Black Panther Party's first recruit. So he was the third member of the Black Panther Party, Lil Bobby. Y'all familiar with Lil Bobby? My bad, Heem. This ain't, I know, bro. Hey, y'all go check out my boy Cool Heem's Instagram page to get that science, that biblical truth. I'm a little bit more. I'm kind of, yeah. I'm gonna have my boy Heem throw some prayers up for me because I need deliverance, because I get a little bit beside myself sometimes. This ain't church, y'all. I'm sorry. Convicted of assault with intent to murder at the age of 22, Cleaver spent 9 years in prison before an essay he published in Ramparts magazine. I talked about Ramparts earlier. Who had an article published in Ramparts? Jean Genet. Jean Genet is the Frenchman, the French eroticist, who came to the United States to try and garner public support for the acquittal of Bobby Seale. He had an article published in Ramparts magazine, which won him his parole in 1966. What is Ramparts magazine? It was founded in 1962 outside of San Francisco by Edward Keating, who was a so-called liberal Catholic. It would quickly devolve into a full-blown leftist rag thanks to its editor, Warren Hinkle, and managing editor, the aforementioned Robert Scheer, the man who met Huey P. Newton in the Berkeley area back in the early 60s. Robert Scheer would later go on to start a cult, a bit of a communist commune that he referred to as the Red Family, along with Tom Hayden. Y'all know who Tom Hayden is, right? Okay. Cleaver's prison letters, published by Ramparts, would become a bestseller known as, what's it called? Soul on Ice. So you got this Antonio Gramsci-like phenomenon. Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist who heavily influenced the minds of the Frankfurt acolytes and the American intellectuals. Antonio Gramsci's work was, of course, translated into English by none other than Buttigieg's father. You have the same phenomenon going on with Eldridge Cleaver. The majority of his intellectual legacy, or the magnum opus, should I say, which is Soul on Ice, was written by Cleaver while he was in prison. It was the faculty and the folks behind the magazine Ramparts that facilitated Eldridge Cleaver's parole and early release. Where did I leave off? So let me back to Ramparts. Cleaver was even put on the staff of Ramparts after his release from prison. So he was a staff member at Ramparts. Ramparts from about 1965 to, I think they finally shut their doors in the early 1970s. Ramparts was the leading left-wing magazine in the country. Ramparts would also, just to give you Ramparts bona fides, Ramparts would also publish Che Guevara's diary. And in 1967, it ran a photo essay called The Children of Vietnam. This was a photo essay, The Children of Vietnam. So when y'all see all them pictures of burning villages, naked little kids running, women culling their babies, running, crying, you all this talk, all this stuff about America and our atrocities in Vietnam and all the stuff we were doing to the villagers and so on and so forth. Remember John Kerry and how he came back and told the story about all of the abuse that he's seen being carried out on behalf of. All of it was lies. All of it untrue. I mean, when you look at the images, hell, it's a war. Nobody likes war. But who had the moral high ground? We can get into the weeds when it comes to how we could have successfully prosecuted that war. But the Soviet Union is never to blame for the war in Vietnam, ladies and gentlemen. The North Vietnamese nationalist movement is never to blame. No. Let's ask the South Vietnamese people what they think. But they ran this photo essay tugging on your heartstrings. Oh, in the war. It was the 1967 photo essay that sparked Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It led him to publicly criticize and publicly come out against the war for the first time in 1967 after the publishing of that photo essay in Ramparts. Now, there was also a famous incident. I don't know if you know this, but Eldridge Cleaver, did y'all know that Eldridge Cleaver was for a short time Betty Shabazz, the widow of the then widow of Malcolm X, for a period of time? He was her personal bodyguard. He and fellow members of the Black Panther Party would escort around Betty Shabazz, particularly when she would come to visit Rampart headquarters, because she was interviewed several times for their magazine. Now, the story of Lil Bobby goes, right? So the story, and I know y'all familiar with the story. If y'all saw the movie Panther that was released, I ain't seen it since I was a kid, but I think in the movie Panther, they showed because the killing of Lil Bobby is one of the most infamous instances in the history of the Panther cause. That and the death of Fred Hampton. Now, am I going to talk about Fred Hampton? No. Why? Because I don't want to. Because see, y'all play this game, but see, we going to lean into the other side today. We going to lean into that because we need to hear what they have to say. When I say they, you're going to find out who the they is when I get to it. But I'm sick and tired of making martyrs out of men like Fred Hampton and Bobby Hutton and Huey P. Newton. Again, I know the folks that I tagged in the beginning didn't come in here. You can send it to whoever you want to send it to. This is an incitement to an intellectual war. Motherfucker, bring it on. Bring it on. I didn't talk about Fred Hampton because I didn't want to. Bobby Hutton, it is said, was shot while trying to surrender. He tripped, and then that's when police opened fire and killed him as he was trying to surrender. It is said that there was something about, mind you, a lot of what took place in this particular instance is all conjecture. We don't really quite know, or do we know? We do know, and we know what happened because the main character involved told us, and I'm going to get to it. Because originally we were told that it was a team, it was about a dozen or so, it was about maybe 2 or 3 cars of Black Panthers being led by Eldridge Cleaver. When Eldridge Cleaver, I think the story goes that he stopped, exited the vehicle, and went to the side of the building or to the side of the car to urinate, I guess in public, or something to that effect, which invited the attention of police. A lot of it, like I said, a lot of it is grainy, a lot of he said, she said, but somehow this led to, of course, an eventual chase and shootout, which resulted in a 9-minute-long standoff in a West Side Oakland home between the Black Panther Party and Oakland police, which led to, of course, the death of Bobby Hutton when he walked out with his hands up in an attempt to surrender. And they say, well, he tripped and then he was shot. Police say that Bobby Hutton was shot because he refused to heed police orders. I'll let you decide who's telling the truth and who's not. But what I will say is this. Cleaver would later admit to journalist Kate Coleman. Do y'all know who Kate Coleman is? Kate Coleman is an important figure in Panther history. She is a brave woman who at one point in her life, I think she's still alive. Kate Coleman at one point had went into hiding because she was afraid for her life due to the investigative work that she had did on the Black Panther Party, because she told it all. Kate Coleman. She told it all, particularly in a July 10th, 1978 article published in Time Magazine. Not Time Magazine, in the New York Times. And we'll get to that New York Times piece later on in this discussion. Cleaver would admit to journalist Kate Coleman that it was a deliberate ambush in retaliation for the assassination of MLK, who Cleaver would often refer to as Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, Eldridge Cleaver, who didn't have a ton of respect for MLK, saw the assassination of MLK as an opportunity to go out and kill a cop. He gave his subordinates the order to go out and kill a police officer. He admitted this, and the story was featured and appeared in a May 19th, 1980 issue of New West magazine with the cover title, "Sold Out." Eldridge Cleaver admits he ambushed those cops. He admitted to journalist Kate Coleman almost 20 years after the fact that the cops did not provoke the shooting, he did. And it was all a plan. How many of you are familiar with the 1980 New West article detailing Eldridge Cleaver's admission that he intentionally ambushed those officers? How many of you are familiar with the fact that he confessed? After the fact, of course, Eldridge Cleaver would go to Algiers and hide out for a while. How are all these Panthers able to go around the country and shit? They would either go to Algiers, they would go to some communist country to go hide. Ashada Shakur, for all we know, may still be alive in Cuba somewhere after breaking out of prison. Huey P. Newton would go to Cuba for a while before returning to the States. Why did he go to Cuba? We'll find out. How are these Panthers able to, where they getting this money from? Who is supporting them? You're going to find out. Cleaver was also, did y'all know this? Cleaver was also nominated for president by the Peace and Freedom Party in 1968. His vice president was another radical named Jerry Rubin. A white radical named Jerry Rubin. I believe, Jerry Rubin. He was white radical named Jerry Rubin. During his acceptance speech, I believe they had a big gathering in Oakland Arena, which was pretty much like, it was like a zoo. Eldridge Cleaver famously remarked during his speech when he accepted the nomination, like he was going to win the presidency in 68, that he wanted to, in fact, or was going to, in fact, rape the wife of the then mayor of San Francisco. Now, if you're familiar with Eldridge Cleaver's background, you probably wouldn't take that threat too lightly. You can go and watch my other discussion on, again, the Black Panther Party and feminism, where I go into Eldridge Cleaver of his life as a rapist and some of the comments that he made with regard to what motivated him to carry out those acts. Now we move on. The politics of murder, y'all. We move on to the New Haven 7. Y'all know about the New Haven 7? Some of y'all probably do. Y'all know about the New Haven 7? Let me tell y'all. So here it goes. In May 1969, Alex Rackley was suspected by other Panthers of being an informant. He was brought to Panther headquarters in New Haven, Connecticut, held captive, and tortured for several days before being taken to the wetland of Middlefield, Connecticut, where he was murdered. I'm going into more detail. The day was May 18th. On May 18th, Rackley was brought to 365 Orchard Street, which was home to a fellow Black Panther member named Warren Kimbrough. In Kimbrough's daughter's room, Rackley was tied to a bed where boiling hot water was poured over his torso, shoulders, thighs for 2 days straight. The man had his skin burned off of him with boiling hot water. Rackley would eventually confess to being an informant, after which he was executed, shot in the head by Kimbrough and fellow Black Panther member Lonnie McLucas, who shot Rackley in the chest before dumping him in the Coachong River. I don't know how to pronounce that river. Some river in Connecticut, Coachong River. So he was shot in the head, shot in the chest, dumped in the river. The New Haven 7, because there were 7 Black Panther Party members involved in this conspiracy to kill Alex Rackley. I only brought up Kimbrough and McLucas because they were the two most important. And there was another one. I forgot his name. I know his last name is Sam, but I forgot his first name because he and Kimbrough would plead guilty. McLucas would admit his involvement, but he would claim that it was a conspiracy and he participated against his will. Now, what university, what well-known university is located in New Haven, Connecticut? Do we know? Do we know? Anybody? Hands in the back? What's in New Haven, Connecticut? New Haven, Connecticut is the home of Yale University, ladies and gentlemen. Why is that important? Well, coincidentally, at the time Alex Rackley was being murdered, Bobby Seale was present at Yale to give a speech. So Seale is in Connecticut while Rackley is being tortured and murdered, giving a speech at Yale. This is 1969. Why in the hell is a man like Bobby Seale being invited to speak at such a prestigious university? Why? You wonder why the Black Panther Party is such a mainstay in American culture. This shit didn't happen by accident. Because they were given validation and they were granted their imprimatur by way of respected institutions of American society. Even the Yale president at the time, whose name was Kingsman Brewer, remarked something to the effect that he doubted that a black revolutionary could get a fair trial in America. He even had to momentarily suspend classes at Yale because the campus was in such an uproar in the defense of Bobby Seale. In the defense of the New Haven Seven. Bobby Seale would become a member of the New Haven Seven because it was Lonnie McLucas who would testify that he killed Alex Rackley under the orders of Bobby Seale. You got to listen to the irony in what I just said there. They said, I doubt whether a black revolutionary could get a fair trial in America. Can you even fathom the irony? The hubris. You are a revolutionary, but you want fair treatment from the very system that you are seeking to overthrow. This is how these motherfuckers, that's how they act today. They turn around, want to burn the system down, overthrow this, overthrow that, but yet they want justice from our courts, the taxpayer courts. They want justice. They want our laws to reflect, These punk-ass revolutionaries always talking this bull crap. Bull crap, yeah. Y'all see, I can euphemize. I didn't curse. They the first ones, soon as somebody break into their house, they won't call the police. But they the same ones, soon as a black criminal is killed by a police officer while resisting arrest, they the first ones on social media talking shit. But as soon as somebody break into their house, they gonna call the police. So again, McLucas would say that he was under the directives of Bobby Seale and Erica Huggins. Erica Huggins would also become a member of the New Haven Seven, a female Panther. Eventually, Seale and Erica were acquitted of any involvement, just to cut to the chase. And again, Jean Genet was involved in a lot of the public outcry. It's mighty strange to see when Bobby Seale, let me just say this. Remember, Bobby Seale and Huey, they were like this. It was funny because Huey looked up to Bobby, but Bobby looked up to Huey. But that would change by the mid-'60s. In a Rolling Stones article titled Revolution on Ice, they were doing a piece on Eldridge Cleaver because by the mid-1970s, there was a rift in the Black Panther Party between the Newton faction and the Cleaver faction. Because guess what? Just like all radical left-wing movements, it began to eat itself because members of the Black Panther Party were beginning to accuse Huey P. Newton of selling out the revolution. Why? Because a lot of the Black Panther Party members were still in the gutter, were still in the streets, struggling, while Huey P. Newton lived in a high-rise penthouse overlooking downtown Oakland. His, by then, second in command, Elaine Brown, was driving around in a red Mercedes, while other female Panthers who were her underlings cleaned her apartment and ran her errands. So there was a beef between Cleaver and Newton by the early to mid-'70s. So this is why the Rolling Stones called this Revolution on Ice, because Eldridge was pretty much sidelined because the bulk of the loyalty still lied in the Newton camp. Lowell Bergman and David Werr wrote the article, and in that article, Cleaver details, or the authors detail, that Seal perceived a need to go in hiding due to fear for his life at the hands of Newton and Elaine Brown. So at this time, Bobby Seale was laying low because he thought that Newton and Elaine Brown had put a contract on his life. And also, if you go to my other talk on the Black Panther Party, I went into detail about the death of Betty Van Patter. I'm not going to talk about Betty Van Patter in this talk for the interest of time, because this is already long. I don't even know if I'm going to finish. My man might come in here and wrap me up, because I got 10 pages worth of notes, and I'm only on page 4. Warren Kimbrough would plead guilty and turn state's evidence. He would tell the government all type of things that he knew about what was going on inside the Black Panther Party. For that, he was given a shortened sentence. He only served 4 years in prison for shooting a man in the head and pleading guilty. But that ain't even the crazy part about it. Mind you, positive people overthrow the system. Huey P. Newton served 3 years, but had his sentence overturned on appeal due to a technicality. Huggin, Seal, acquitted. Warren Kimbrough, 4 years for cold-blooded murder. But the black man cannot get justice in the white man's courts. They are still saying this today, but as far back as the late 60s, early 1970s, sure enough, cold-blooded killers fronting like they fucking political revolutionaries was shooting motherfuckers and getting away with it. But they gonna tell you that you can't get justice from America. You can't get justice from the white man's courts. When a lot of these radicals in the Black Panther Party, in the Weather Underground, the Symbionese Liberation Army, the Black Liberation Army, I can go on down the line. Most of them did not see a day in prison, not a day. There was some exceptions. You look at the case of what you call it, the famous Brinks truck robbery and what have you, with Kathy Bodin and the like. And anyway, I don't want to get into too many tangents. I know this. I can just spot off the top of my head. I know this history too good, y'all. So pardon me if I'm a little bit all over the place. I'm gonna try to keep it in the pocket. Warren Kimbrough served 4 years after his conviction, turned state's evidence, and guess what? This man went on to receive a graduate degree from Harvard. From there, he eventually became assistant dean at what is now Eastern Connecticut State University. This motherfucker, Warren Kimbrough, became the dean of a college. A killer. Chuck, what happened to our universities, man? What's going on? Been like this. I'll give you another example. Newton, too, would be invited to speak at a Yale symposium to discuss a book he co-authored with renowned psychologist Erik Erikson titled In Search of Common Ground. So here you have Huey P. Newton is collaborating with mainstream intellectuals like Erik Erikson and being invited to Yale University to come talk about it. Huey P. Newton eventually would get his bachelor's degree from Merritt College, and he would later go on, in the midst of all of this shit that's going on, he was accepted into UC Santa Cruz's doctoral program, where he eventually earned his PhD in philosophy. So Huey P. Newton, the pimp, drug dealer, murderer, drug addict, crackhead, Huey P. Newton was a doctor of philosophy. Speaking of Santa Cruz, I wanted to mention this about UC Santa Cruz. Y'all know the legend of the Santa Cruz Mountains? It is said that the Santa Cruz Mountains was a training ground and a burial site of the Black Panther Party. This is the legend, that deep in the Santa Cruz Mountains, they were training for the revolution. And any of the Panthers that got out of line, it was like, they would kill them, dismember them, burn their bodies, and bury them in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Now, what is myth and what is reality is very grainy, but what led to the legend of the Santa Cruz Mountains was the discovery of the body of Fred Bennett. Let me just read about Fred Bennett real quick. The legend of the Santa Cruz Mountains was that it was a training ground and a burial site for discarded Panther members. This was sparked by the 1971 discovery of missing Black Panther Party member Fred Bennett, whose charred and scattered remains had been found in the remote mountains 50 miles south of San Francisco. Along with the charred, scattered bones of Fred Bennett, authorities found 49 sticks of dynamite, nitroglycerin, fuses, timing devices, and dynamite caps. Those of you who don't know, look, mind you, I don't know how to do all the I ain't got all the graphics on the screen behind me. I don't know how to put up sound bites and show y'all the shit. But just trust me when I tell you, if you're listening to me right now, if you're interested, write some of this stuff, write these names down and look this up yourself. Read about the case and the discovery of the body of Fred Bennett in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I'm not making any of this stuff up. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, and I may get some things wrong, and I try to correct myself. But do your own research if you don't believe me. This was also comparable to the famous 29th Street raid. The Panthers had a weapons cache in a home on 29th Street. This became known as the famous 29th Street Black Panther Party raid. I started to list all the stuff the authorities found in this house, but I just took it upon myself not to even bother. So let's move to Elaine Brown. Mind you, these America's Vietcong, the politics of murder. Let's talk about Elaine Brown. What is Elaine Brown's claim to fame? Elaine Brown's claim to fame was, of course, well, aside from all the stuff she did, but she wrote her autobiography entitled A Taste of Power was published in 1992. By this point, it's funny how friends just keep on re-emerging. Because at this point, Elaine Brown was living with a wealthy Frenchman in Paris. Now, I don't know if they were lovers, if they was kicking. I don't think she ever married him. But at this time, by the 90s, Elaine had moved to France where she was living the good life. Of her book, Taste of Power, written by Elaine Brown, Alice Walker said, Elaine brought us that amazing light of the black woman's magical resilience in the gloominess of her bitter despair. Her book should be put on the shelf right beside the autobiography of Malcolm X. Time magazine said of Elaine Brown's book, discovering that love is the most demanding political act of all. This is what Elaine did. She discovered that love is the most brilliant demanding political act of all. Los Angeles Times book reviewer Carolyn C. said of Elaine's book that it is beautiful, touching, astonishing. Movie makers, where are you? The New York Times even displayed a full-page cover photo of Elaine in its Sunday magazine with a text by one of its black editors that celebrated her as a black feminist heroine. And along with another feature profiling the college-age children of Black Panther Party members, Elaine's daughter amongst them, who were represented as a, quote, voice of a new militancy amongst the youth that emerged in the wake of the Los Angeles uprising. This is the 90s. So this is what some of those in the mainstream had to say about Elaine Brown's book, where she details the criminal goings-on inside the Black Panther Party. But she justifies it. And I'm going to tell you how she justifies it. Again, you wonder why the Black Panther Party is still celebrated? You wonder why you go to the shade room and you read all types of bullshit comments endorsing people like Angela Davis and Stokely Carmichael and Fred Hampton and Huey P. Newton? You wonder why? New York Times, LA Times, Time Magazine loved her. The New York Times even wrote a glowing book review of Huey P. Newton's autobiography, Revolutionary Suicide. If you just go, you can probably find the archived New York Times article of Huey P. Newton's the review of Huey P. Newton's book, Revolutionary Suicide. Just go and read it. I'm going to read from you a quote of Elaine Brown's book, A Taste of Power. This details an incident where Huey P. Newton had pistol whipped a black tailor named Preston Callens. Preston Callens was beat so badly to the point where he had to have cranial surgery to repair his fractured skull. How do we know what happened to Preston Callens? This is what Elaine says. This is coming directly from A Taste of Power. Power to the people. Black Panthers. Heroes. This is what Elaine, mind you, Preston Callens was a black man. Elaine Brown says, to Huey, I will take care of the blood, I told him. He shrugged. Callens, the tailor, had taken the brunt of his raging anguish. Callens' blood now stained the penthouse ceilings, and carpets, and walls, and plants, and Gwen's clothes. Who was Gwen? Gwen was Huey P. Newton's wife. I'll put that word wife in quotations because Huey P. Newton did not believe in monogamy because he thought monogamy was an expression of capitalist culture because monogamy denotes ownership. So he didn't believe in monogamy. Not only was he a drug addict and a pimp and a murderer, he was a whoremonger who would oftentimes have sex with the wives and girlfriends of his Black Panther Party members to their chagrin. Some Black Panther Party members who were in relationships with female Black Panther Party members would have to hide their relationships, like Brave, like it reminds me of the movie Braveheart with William Wallace when Mel Gibson depicted William Wallace. Remember how he tried to hide his marriage from the English nobles because he didn't want to have to abide by what was it called, prima nocta. Some of the Black Panther Party members had to hide their relationships because if Huey found out that one of his subordinates in the Black Panther Party had a girlfriend or a wife, he would commandeer them to his bedroom. He would have sex with the girlfriends and wives of his fellow revolutionaries because he didn't want them to become enticed by bourgeois values like monogamy. So I don't know why the hell Huey P. Newton had a wife, but I digress. Gwen's clothes, even the fluffy blue and white towels in the bathroom. I assured Huey the blood would be washed away and his apartment renewed in time for his return. Huey P. Newton was pacing up and down the holding cell that occupied a corner of the police processing room. She says, I caught a familiar look of arrogant satisfaction on his face. Fuck Callens. His slight smile said. While I noted Huey's irreverent attitude about the whole affair, it occurred to me how little I, too, actually cared about Callens. He was neither a man nor a victim to me. I had come to believe that everything would balance out in the revolutionary end, so it was all justified in the cause of the revolution. She went on. I also knew that being concerned about Callens was too costly, particularly in terms of my position in the party. Yes, I thought, fuck Callens. She didn't even see Callens as a person because she was walking in lockstep with Huey because she knew that if she showed sympathy for Preston Callens, who had been Huey P. Newton's personal tailor, I don't know what the hell pissed Huey off that day. Maybe he was high because he was oftentimes high on cocaine. And then later on, by the 1980s, he would begin to freebase. He would start doing crack. I don't know, something upset him and he beat his personal tailor, almost beat him to death. She said that she could not even display sympathy for Callens because she thought or was in fear that it would put her life at risk because Huey P. Newton would put out a contract on her. it's quite ironic because I guess it speaks to the whole keep yourself close, keep your enemies, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Because Huey P. Newton would tell others about Elaine Brown and talk about how psycho she was, and he didn't trust her because of her temper and that she would always fly off the handle. Like Elaine Brown was almost like a functional psychopath. Of course, it was Elaine Brown that greenlit the assassination of the Black Panther Party bookkeeper, a white woman who was a radical leftist by the name of Betty Van Patter. And of course, Huey P. Newton also had a hit squad that was called the Squad. And the leader of the squad was a man by the name of Big Al, or Big Man. Big Man. I was in that Big Man. That was one of Huey P. Newton's number one assassins, was this dude named Big Man. I think that was his nickname, Big Man. Now, I want to talk about, there's another book. So there's two books. There's the Taste of Power, and there's also This Side of Glory, written by David Hilliard. David Hilliard was a high-ranking Black Panther Party member who saw a lot of goings on. He wrote a book entitled This Side of Glory. Now, David Hilliard would go on to talk about how the Black Panther Party, paranoia and the misogyny and a lot of the stuff that was going on, and how he blames a lot of this on the FBI and the CIA and what have you. Again, David Hilliard is full of shit. David Hilliard, mind you, going back to Genet. Genet, when he came to the United States, he would contact ramparts, asking them to provide him with an interpreter because there was a woman on the staff at ramparts who spoke French fluently. I can't remember her name, but she would travel with Genet as his interpreter while he was doing work with the Black Panther Party. And she claims that she was raped by David Hilliard. He doesn't admit this in his autobiography. I never heard David Hilliard speak of this. As a matter of fact, I think I said on my previous work I did on the Black Panther Party that David Hilliard, I think, appeared on Alex Jones' show, InfoWars, but that wasn't David Hilliard. I was getting my names mixed up. That is, in fact, I think Leonard Pinckney. Y'all see him. He does a lot with Alex Jones. I guess he's a former member of the Black Panther Party. I think his first name is Leonard, but I know his last name is Pinckney. Wasn't David Hilliard, it's Pinckney that goes on the Alex Jones show. But nevertheless, David Hilliard was accused of rape by a Rampart staffer who was working at the time as a translator for Jean Genet. And the rape allegedly occurred at the home of actor Donald Sutherland. And I'm going to get to that because now Hollywood is going to come into play. Now, it's going to get a little fun. Because I don't know if y'all know about a lot of this. It's going to get interesting. I'm going to talk about Huey P. Newton's relationship with a man named Bert Schneider. Now, again, Hollywood, we see time and time again that there's this inconspicuous sort of Jewish underbelly, this Jewish undercurrent everywhere we look, especially when we start talking about the left. The reason why I bring that up is there's an interesting book that talks about, and I haven't read it. It comes highly recommended by someone I trust. This book is called The Ordeal of Civility. I cannot remember the author's name, and I haven't read it myself, but it's called The Ordeal of Civility. It talks about France, the environment in France post the French Revolution, and what it was like for Jews at the time in France. And it goes into how Jewish people began to imbibe or to erect this concept of a community of the faithful, where the state of the Israel became more of this almost sort of like this transcendental mindset as opposed to an actual place where how can I explain it? God, I wish I wouldn't open up this can of worms because now I feel like I have to explain it. But pretty much, it kind of goes into detail as to why so many Jews adopted the secular, atheistic Marxist worldview, and it has a link again to the devastation, the cultural devastation at the hands of the hands of the French Revolution. Again, there's the French Revolution again. But you always find Hollywood and all these folks surrounding this because it's the very unique history of the Jews that kind of brought them into this concept where the very concept, you have to understand, again, and this is one of the key points of delineation between what we call fascism and communism, because the dictatorial or totalitarian praxis within the fascistic worldview lies at the point of the state. Communist believes in the overall abolition of the state because the nation state should be superseded by the interest of the class. So the Jews thought that the state, that the source of anti-Semitic oppression and repression came from the state. You destroy the very concept of the nation state, then that would sort of facilitate the coming forth of Israel. It's a real deep, it's deep, y'all. It's deep. The ordeal of civility. Who was Bert Schneider? I forgot. I think I was making a point that I didn't end up making, but nevertheless. Bert Schneider was a Hollywood producer and Oscar winner. And he won an Oscar I'm sorry, let me start over, y'all, because I'm daydreaming. He was a Hollywood producer and Oscar, and he won an Oscar for his anti-Vietnam War documentary, Hearts and Minds, as well as some of his generation's most iconic films, including Easy Rider. I know you all have heard of the movie Easy Rider, 5 Easy Pieces, and The Last Picture Show. Bert Schneider, check this out now. See, y'all be talking about, man, damn, when the Hollywood man get so woke, man, why they keep, at these award shows, man, they keep lecturing us and telling us and talking about this. Did y'all see Gabrielle Union in that low-life, poor excuse for a man, Dwayne Wade, at the NAACP Image Awards? Did y'all hear that? Anyway, back to Bert Schneider. At the 1975 Academy Awards, Bert Schneider accepted his Oscar for his documentary Hearts and Minds. Check this out. By reading a telegram from Ambassador Dang Bai Thai of the Provincial Revolutionary Government, aka the Viet Cong, thanking the American anti-war movement for, and I quote, all they have done on behalf of peace. So here you have a Hollywood producer in Bert Schneider who took to the stand to accept an Oscar, and he read, a telegram to the Academy from a member of the Viet Cong thanking the anti-war movement. Check this out. Did y'all know that the New York Times, a lot of our so-called liberal media talking heads and liberal media publications and institutions, their articles and publications were read aloud on a speaker to American POWs. So American POWs, in order to weaken the morale of American troops, they would read to them the American media's account of the Vietnam War. And they would pick, of course, from liberal sources like the New York Times. And they would do this at the famous Hanoi Hilton. This is what they called it. The Hanoi Hilton. I know y'all familiar with the Hanoi Hilton. This speech he gave infuriated the likes of old guard Hollywood stalwarts like Frank Sinatra and Bob Hope. I just wanted to say that, put that out there. Frank Sinatra, he was pissed. They say, Frank Sinatra, how dare you get up in here and read that pinko commie bullshit? Frank Sinatra was pissed. And Bob Hope, just to name a couple. You still had some patriots in Hollywood at the time, and they weren't afraid to let you know about it. Oh, speaking of patriots, I meant to tell y'all, did y'all know that Huey P. Newton went to school? Because I thought about some modern day Hollywood conservatives that are out and open about it, and these men are pretty much uncancelable because they're in the golden years of their lives, and they've been there and done that, and they don't give a damn. They say what they want to say, and of course, that's my boy James Woods and Clint Eastwood and John Voight. John Voight was a part of this crowd here. That's why he knows. And the reason why I went back to them is because, as you all know, that this is an interesting aside, some trivial stuff, that that Huey P. Newton's high school, the high school he graduated from, was also Clint Eastwood's alma mater. They went to the same high school. Not at the same time, but anyway, Clint Eastwood and I just thought that was interesting. And Huey P. Newton's name, Huey P. Newton, he was named after former Louisiana governor. I think his middle name is Pierce. I think the P stands for Pierce, but nevertheless, Huey P. Long was one-time governor of Louisiana. And Huey P. Newton's, I think his father was the one that was mixed race, if memory serves me correctly, but his mixed race father looked up to the white governor of Louisiana. He thought he was a great man, and he named his son after Louisiana's white governor, Huey P. Long. Because, according to his father, Huey P. Long did a lot to try and bridge the gap between blacks and whites, whatever. Anyway, this an aside. And also, Huey P. Newton also went to the same high school as baseball great Kurt Flood. I just thought I'd throw that in there. So, where have I left off? Okay. So, it was Schneider, dig this, it was Bert Schneider that financed Newton's escape to Cuba to avoid criminal charges for the shooting of Kathleen Smith. Bert Schneider spent millions of dollars on Huey P. Newton and other members of the Black Panther Party, but particularly Huey P. Newton. They were like this. Huey P. Newton, throughout the 70s, his living expenses were financed not primarily by way of his clandestine acts on Oakland streets, but he was the beneficiary of the wealth of Bert Schneider. This is why a lot of Panthers, led by Eldridge Cleaver, were in a mutiny, because Huey P. Newton was living a good life thanks to his connections in Hollywood. Who is Kathleen Smith? Kathleen Smith was a 17-year-old prostitute whom Huey P. Newton had shot in the face, which paralyzed her from the neck down. She would eventually succumb to her injury. For the pistol whipping, I mentioned this, of Preston Callan, and for pulling guns on a couple of undercover vice cops in an Oakland after-hours bar. There was even a rumor that Huey P. Newton was one of 3 gunmen who, with a shotgun, shot a bodyguard outside of an Oakland nightclub. Witnesses fingered Huey P. Newton, said he was there, he was one of the gunmen, but I don't think Newton was ever charged. Again, let me go on. Newton was also personal friends. Now check this who's who out. Newton was also personal friends with the likes of Marlon Brando. Yeah, you come to my home. You never offer me friendship or a cup of coffee, but yet you want me to do murder. I only want justice or revenge. What did my man say? That is not justice. Your daughter is still alive. Man, I love that fucking movie. Marlon Brando, one of the greatest actors, arguably the greatest actor in the history of Hollywood cinema. But he was a leftist through and through. He was one of the young Turks that brought in this whole attitude in the late 60s and 70s. As a matter of fact, speaking of John Voight, listen to John Voight if you can find some of his talks and interviews on YouTube where he talks about the influence that Marlon Brando had on the young up-and-coming Hollywood stars in the era of 1970 cinema. And they all looked up to Marlon Brando because he was the bad boy. Marlon Brando brought in, along with, James Dean, who died tragically when he was young. But yeah, they ushered in the era of the anti-hero. But Marlon Brando was friends with Huey P. Newton, was a leftist through and through. He was also friends, of course, with a name I know you all are familiar with. This woman I cannot stand. Every time I see her face, I say, God, how low we must be, how forgiving we are as a country that this woman is still allowed in polite society. And that is none other than that motherfucker Jane fucking Fonda. Damn, I just cussed twice in one sentence. Jane Fonda. Boy, y'all know. If you know anything about the history of Vietnam and the radicalism of the 1960s and the 1970s, I know you're familiar with Hanoi Jane, who was, of course, the wife of Tom Hayden, the leader of the Students for a Democratic Society, that is the progenitor organ of the Weather Underground. And it was Tom Hayden, who is also, along with Bobby Seale, a member of the Chicago 7. Y'all know the Chicago 7. I think they got a Netflix documentary about it. And the conspiracy to incite a riot at the 1968 Democratic National Convention. Tom Hayden did it on purpose, along with the help of men like Bobby Seale. That was Jane Fonda's husband. Again, Tom Hayden was able to finance a lot of his radical activities, due in large part to the finances and the riches of Jane Fonda. They talk all this anti-capitalism bull crap, but many of them were wealthy, and they were living off the wealth of their Hollywood benefactors. And it was Jane Fonda and Tom Hayden who engaged in what I believe was called the Indochina Peace Campaign after the peace agreement was established between in Vietnam. I believe the year was 1973, if memory serves me correctly. But then the agitation continued in the wake of Watergate and everything else with help from Jane Fonda and her husband, Tom Hayden, to cut off aid to South Vietnam. Of course, this led to the communists taking over the entirety of Vietnam, and it led to, of course, the rise of the Khmer Rouge. Now, if you don't know about the Khmer Rouge, just look up the Cambodian genocide. I make the case that considering the size of Cambodia and the number of its sheer population, that the Cambodian genocide, the killing fields of Cambodia, is arguably the greatest the greatest genocide of the 20th century. Jane Fonda had a hand in the rise of the Khmer Rouge. I can't stand that woman. May God have mercy on her soul. He was also friends with Dennis Hopper. And he was also close buddies, Huey P. Newton, with Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson, while Huey was on the lam in Cuba, Jack Nicholson even went to Cuba to go and visit Huey. He would also, during his visit to Cuba, would meet with the dictator himself, Fidel Castro, where it is said by those who attended the meeting that Jack Nicholson and Fidel Castro got along great. Damn, how was he able to get along? Why was he able? And see, this is the thing that kills me. Again, y'all sit up here in the shade room and then on Celebrity Talk and Black Twitter. I can't stand that fucking digital ghetto full of stupidity and quasi-intellectualism. You run around and you want to make yourself believe that you and the people who you claim represent you and fight for you are part of some grassroots underground movement that was just fighting against system and raising against the machine. What the hell happened to the revolution won't be televised? What happened to that attitude and notion? Look like it's going to be televised to me, and I'm going to tell you how it was going to be televised. Even Richard Pryor, the Richard Pryor, with whom Newton and Snyder, because Snyder was too a degenerate, a drug addict, and a whoremonger, Snyder, Newton, and Pryor would all three at times come together to do freebase. Did y'all know that Richard Pryor was pegged to star as Newton in a film about the radical's life? Because Bert Snyder and Huey P. Newton were working on a screenplay about Huey P. Newton's life, and they asked Richard Pryor if he mind playing the lead role. There was some sort of tentative agreement, but the entire plan was nixed once, of course, Richard Pryor famously set his face and scalp on fire while freebasing. Huey P. Newton, a drug addict. Richard Pryor, for all of his comedic genius, was a drug addict. He and Huey P. Newton would do drugs together. This was in the 1980s. Back to Kathleen Smith, the 18-year-old prostitute that Huey P. Newton had shot in the face. On the eve of the trial for the killing of Kathleen Smith, a group of, my man said that Richard Pryor was having sex with Angela Davis. That's what they said in the comment section. On the eve of the trial of and it all makes sense because I know for a fact that Richard Pryor and Huey P. Newton, I know for sure that they was crack buddies. You can take that to the bank. On the eve of the trial for the killing of Kathleen Smith, a group of armed assassins attempted to kill the key witness, another prostitute named Crystal Gray. She was the key witness in the state's case against Newton. Only the men shot into the wrong apartment. The Panther hit team accidentally shot one of their own in the back, and another Panther was shot in the hand. We know about this. We know of this because a Black Panther who was a part of the hit team named Flores Forbes would later confess his role in the attempted assassination. Now, Huey P. Newton, of course, would try to distance himself and say, man, I didn't order that. They were acting on their own, and claimed publicly to dismiss all those involved from the party. Y'all believe him? Now, let's do this here. Roll call. Let's do a roll call. This is a memorial, a veterans memorial. Say his name. Say her name. Breonna Taylor. What's it at? Michael Brown, Austin Sterling. Say his name. Say their name. Okay, we're going to say some names. Y'all want to hear some names? Because I'm going to say some names. We already talked about Officer John Fry. He was white. This the Veterans Memorial right here. Oakland Police Department, California, end of watch. Saturday, October 28th, 1967, was shot and killed after making a routine traffic stop. He was 23 years old. His tour lasted 1 year and 6 months. The offender, who was Newton, was apprehended, convicted of manslaughter, and later acquitted. Officer Thomas Johnson, say his name, was black. He was a Metro Nashville Police Department. He worked for the Metro Nashville Police Department in Tennessee, end of watch, Tuesday, January 16th, 1968. Officer Johnson stopped the vehicle wanted in connection with passing false money orders. When Officer Johnson exited his patrol car, the 5 occupants opened fire with a .30-30 rifle, striking him in the chest. The assailants were all members of the Black Panther Party. He died at the age of 39. Tour, 10 years. Offenders, 3 of which were convicted of first-degree murder and received 99 years in prison. All 3 of them would later escape from prison, and to this day they are still at large. The 4th was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, and the 5th suspect wasn't apprehended until 1986. 35-something years after the fact, 20 years after the fact. Officer Charles W. Thompson was white, worked for the Metro Nashville Police Department in Tennessee, end of watch. Sunday, March 17th, 1968, Officer Thompson arrived on the scene to back up Officer Johnson and was shot 7 times. He was just 29 years old, served on the force for 6 years. I'm going through them all. I took every single solitary person that I could find, and I'm going to say their names. Some of these people were survived by wives and children. Some of their children are probably still alive today, lost their parents. If you know any of them, and I know I don't have a huge audience, but just tell them I'm shouting out their parents. I'm giving the credence and the flowers to their parents. We gonna say their names. Officer Nelson Alvin Sasker was white, worked for the Santa Ana Police Department in California, end of watch, June 7th, 1968. Officer Sasker was shot and killed when he was ambushed by a member of the Black Panther Party. He observed 2 suspects hiding in the shadows on a residential street when he was shot twice in the abdomen as he approached them. He was just 24 years old. 1 year, 6 months on the force. The offender received the second-degree murder in 1970 and he was convicted, of second-degree murder in 1970. He received a 5-year to life sentence. He was paroled in 1977. The man did 7 years for killing a police officer.
Patrolman Frank Garrison Rappaport was white. Chicago Police Department, Illinois. End of watch. Thursday, November 13th, 1969. Patrolman Rappaport responded to a false call of a man with a gun by Black Panther Party members when he entered a gangway between two buildings at 5824 South King Street. A man opened fire with a shotgun, striking him in the chest. He was just 36 years old, served 3 years, 7 months. The offender was shot and killed. One was wounded and 2 more escaped. Say his name. Say their names. Again, Moving on, Patrolman John J. Gilhooly was white, worked for the Chicago Police Department. End of watch. Friday, November 14th, 1969. Patrolman Gilhooly accompanied Patrolman Rappaport. He too was ambushed, shot twice, once in the neck and once in the face. He would die the following day. He was only 21 years old. 1 year, 1 month on the force. Power to the people. Say his name. Say their names. I know, but they was all right. Remember, go back to the beginning. What did I say when I quoted? I talked about the Black Panther Party 10-point program. I cited the quote from the leader of the Uhuru movement, Amali Yefshatala, and what he had to say about police officers. Off the pigs, kill the pigs. If you believe that the police is an occupying force, and you sincerely and truly believe that in your heart of hearts, and you ain't got no fucking moral compass to begin with in the first place because you were a fucking criminal before you became a member of the Black Panther Party, what would you do? You think that these men wouldn't hesitate to kill a cop? No, I'm sorry. It was COINTELPRO. The feds did it. But the Black Panther Party was trying to instigate a guerrilla war on American streets. But the FBI is the villain. But all the bullshit y'all enjoy today, running around, black folk, spoiled as all get out. From the poorest mob you can imagine, still walking around with $1,200 red bottom tennis shoes on, to your upper class black, successful, respected in society. Still, they too peddle in this left wing, not this pablum. They still peddle in it. You wouldn't be able to enjoy the comfortability that you have now had the Black Panther Party won, had they got their way. Thank God for the FBI and their efforts to destroy this monstrosity. This ain't church. We moving on. Police officer James T. Sackett Sr. was white, worked for the St. Paul Police Department in Minnesota. End of watch. Friday, May 22nd, 1970. Officer Sackett was shot and killed by 2 suspects after responding to an emergency call at 859 Hag Avenue. He was ambushed from across the street by a suspect with a high-powered rifle. Coward. The emergency call was a false call made by a Black Panther Party member with the intention of killing an officer. He was just 28 years old. He served 1 year and 6 months. The offenders were questioned but weren't charged. But they were finally arrested and charged 35 years later in January of 2005. Both men received life sentences. Patrolman William A. Miss Cannon. He was white. Toledo Police Department. End of watch. Friday, September 18th, 1970. Patrolman Miss Cannon was shot and killed while sitting in a marked patrol car at the intersection of Door and Junction Avenues outside of Black Panther headquarters during a race riot when a man walked up and shot him point blank range. He was 33 years old. He served 3 years on the force. The offender was acquitted after 2 hung juries. Yeah, somebody said they rethinking Assata Shakur. Yeah, you should. Police officer Glenn E. Smith, he was black. He was from the Detroit Police Department, my home city, Michigan. End of watch. October 24th, 1970. Officer Smith was shot and killed by a sniper after arriving at a home used by the Black Panther Party at 3376 16th Street. Officers attempted to issue a ticket to 2 Black Panther Party members for illegally distributing literature when a long-barreled rifle poked out of a bay window, firing a shot and killing Officer Smith. He was 26 years old. Served 2 years on the force. The offender, there were 16 Black Panther Party members in the house. All of them were eventually apprehended and charged. All 16 members were found not guilty. And to make it so bad, this black officer was in plain clothes. He arrived, I don't know if he was off duty, but my research showed me that he was in plain clothes and he arrived to the scene to issue backup for officers already on the scene. He didn't even have to be there. He was black. And I can guarantee you that at least some of the officers on the scene were white. The black officer coming to the aid of a white officer, the black officer get killed by another black man. All 16 found not guilty. Say his name. Who's next? Corrections Sergeant Britt Miller was white, worked for the Louisiana Department of Corrections. End of watch, Monday, April 17th, 1972. Corrections Officer Sergeant Miller was stabbed to death at an Angola state prison by 2 inmates who were members of the Black Panther Party. The inmates used sharpened lawnmower blades to stab Sergeant Miller 38 times in Pine 1 dormitory. He was just 23 years old, served 1 year. Both offenders were given life sentences and both spent 40 years in solitary confinement, which is more than any other inmate in U.S. history. Are y'all familiar with the Mark Essex event? Who's Mark Essex? Who's Mark Essex? Y'all know about Mark Essex? Well, you should know. Let's talk about the Mark Essex affair that happened in Louisiana, at the Howard Johnson's Hotel in Louisiana. Let me go through my roll call. Let me keep going. Because, see, Mark Essex was a member of the Black Panther Party, and he would try and burn down an adjacent warehouse and the hotel, and he would pretty much take the entire Howard Johnson's hotel hostage, where he then began to shoot civilians as they innocently walked down the street. So you had a Black Panther Party member and Mark Essex, who was radicalized by the teachings of Karl Marx, commandeered a Louisiana hotel and began shooting civilians from outside of a window. Mark Essex. Y'all gonna learn about Mark Essex this month? He killed Cadet Alfred E. Harrell. He was black. He was working for the New Orleans Police Department. End of watch, Sunday, December 31st, 1972. Damn, on New Year's Eve. Cadet Harrell was shot and killed by a sniper, this was Mark Essex, at 10:55 p.m. while working the gate at the Central Lookup. He was shot with a .44 caliber carbine from 280 feet away. The suspect, Mark Essex, was a Black Panther Party member. This young man was black, and I remember this off the top of my head because he was survived by a wife and child. He was just 19 years old, man. 19 with a wife and child. Said, I want to start a career in law enforcement. Was gunned down by this punk. He served less than a year, man. Mark Essex, just to cut to the chase, he was eventually shot from a helicopter. They had helicopters hovering over, and a sniper from a helicopter was able to pick him off. But let's go through all the people that he killed. Patrolman Paul A. Persigo was white, New Orleans Police Department. End of watch, Sunday, January 7th, 1973. Patrolman Persigo was shot and killed by Mark Essex, who had shot several civilians and set fires at a local hotel. He was just 33 years old, served on the force for just 6 years. Patrolman Philip J. Coleman Sr. was too white, New Orleans Police Department. End of watch, Sunday, January 7th, 1973. Patrolman Coleman had driven his patrol car to a location where another person had been shot to try to rescue them. He was shot and killed as he stepped from his patrol car. He was just 26 years old. only served 5 years, and the offender, of course, was Mark Essex. Now, the reason why some of the dates as far as the end of watch is concerned, because some of these men would succumb to their wounds days or even weeks later. So some of the days aren't exactly aligned. Let's see. Department Superintendent Louis Joseph Sergo. He was white, worked for the New Orleans Police Department, was killed on that Sunday, January 7th, 1973. Superintendent Sergo was shot as he led a team of officers up a dark stairwell to try and rescue 2 other officers who were trapped in an elevator. And this was deep about this man here. He was a United States Army veteran who served in World War II and had served on the New Orleans Police Department for 21 years. He was gunned down at the age of 41 by Mark Essex. Now, I think to go back, I said Cadet Harold's end of watch was December 31st, 1972. I think that is a clerical error on my behalf, because I don't see, all of them wouldn't have conveniently died on January 7th. So that must have meant to put January 7th, because I believe Cadet Harold was one of the victims of Mark Essex. So let me just issue that correction right there. And so that's the story of Mark Essex. If you want to know about, just look up Mark Essex, the Howard Johnson Hotel, and have at it. One of the most infamous moments in the history of the so-called revolutionary struggle. But they don't want to talk about that. Park Ranger Kenneth Carmel Patrick. He was white. He worked for the United States Department of the Interior for the National Park Service for the U.S. government. His end of watch was Sunday, August 5th, 1973. Park Ranger Patrick was shot and killed while making a traffic stop at Point Reyes National Seashore. The vehicle contained members of the Black Panther Party. One man opened fire with a 9mm handgun as Park Ranger Patrick approached the vehicle. A gunfight ensued. Ranger Patrick was struck in the head. He was 40 years old, served 10 years on the force, and the offender was convicted of his murder and was paroled in 2002. Now, who's this? What do we have here? This book, for those of you who can't see, I can't. Live from Death Row, written by Mumia Abu Jamal. Mumia Abu Jamal is another infamous Black Panther, ladies and gentlemen. He was a member of one of the branches, or he was a member of the Philadelphia branch. Many, if not all of you, are probably familiar with the name Mumia Abu Jamal. Again, I brought my books here to show you. I've did the research and I've done the work. If you want Mumia Abu Jamal's account of what I'm about to tell you, you can read his memoir, Live from Death Row. Because I'm about to talk about the case of Mumia Abu Jamal and the murder of Daniel J. Faulkner. He was white. He worked for the Philadelphia Police Department. End of watch, December 9th, 1981. Officer Faulkner stopped a light blue Volkswagen at the corner of 13th and Locust Streets for driving the wrong way down a runway street. Officer Faulkner had the passenger exit the vehicle. As the officer was speaking with the driver struck Officer Faulkner in the face, after which a fight ensued. The driver's brother, who was Jamal, came from a parking lot across the street and opened fire on Officer Faulkner, shooting him in the back 4 times. Officer Faulkner, still alive, managed to return fire, striking Jamal. Jamal was able to fire again as he stood over the fallen officer, shooting him in the face. When backup arrived, Jamal was lying several feet away from the officer with the murder weapon in his hand. Jamal was convicted of murder and sentenced to death in 2 separate trials. In December 2001, a federal judge overturned his sentence. Jamal was subsequently sentenced to life in prison. In 2012, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court rejected an appeal to overturn his life sentence. Faulkner was just 25 years old, served 5 years for the Philadelphia PD. Now, to this day, there's a lot of back and forth about what happened, who did what. Of course, you got folk, free Mumia. Free Mumia. You hear these stupid ass rappers still saying this bullshit. Free Mumia. Free Mumia Abu Jamal. I don't know. Maybe you think Mumia was innocent. Maybe you think it was a setup. Social engineering and whatnot. If that's what you believe, go with God. I'm almost done with the roll call, y'all. I know y'all probably getting bored. But I got to do this, man. Who else gonna do it? These are all forgotten men. These are fallen soldiers. These are fallen men. To this day, we are still living in the wake of the cultural rot that was popularized by the Black Panther Party. This is why you have so much criminality on your streets, because our police departments have been handicapped by political correctness and progressive policing. This began back then. The Black Panther Party helped bring in this attitude. Off the pigs. Lieutenant Ted Cephas Elmore was white, worked for the Catawba County Sheriff's Office. End of watch Wednesday, December 27, 1983. Lieutenant Elmore succumbed to wounds sustained 11 years earlier when he was shot while making a traffic stop at Highway 6470. The vehicle contained 2 Black Panther Party members who had shot and wounded an Atlanta police officer several weeks prior. Lieutenant Elmore was left paralyzed as a result of the unprovoked confrontation. The suspect vehicle was found containing several rifles, 3 shotguns, a bazooka, and 15,000 rounds of ammunition. Lieutenant Elmore was 54 years old. He served on the force for 12 years. The offenders were convicted of felonious and secret assault. One received 23 to 25 years and was paroled on August 1990. So he did 7-8 years. And the other received just 5 years and was paroled in 1975. Shit, talking about the prison industrial complex. We ain't got enough prisons. The system doesn't create criminality. The existence of the privately owned prison industrial complex does not create crime. The privately owned prison industrial complex is filling a need in a market. The market describes the nature of human interaction. Prisons exist because there is a market for them. We need more of them. That's why they keep coming in the front door, out the back door, because our prisons are overcrowded. Not because of over-criminalization, this stupid-ass cockamamie left-wing term, but our prisons are overcrowded because these sons of bitches don't know how to act. Deputy Sheriff Ricky Leon Kitchen, he was black. Leon Kitchen and his partner went to serve a warrant at a subject's workplace. Oh, his end of watch. He worked for the Fulton County Sheriff's Office in Georgia. End of watch was March 17th, year 2000. Whoa, 2000. Wow, was Panthers around still in 2000? He and his partner went to serve a warrant at the suspect's workplace. After failing to locate anyone, the sheriffs drove around the block and spotted a man standing next to a parked vehicle. They approached the man, asked to see his hands, after which the suspect opened fire, striking both deputies several times. Sheriff Kitchen would succumb to his injuries the following day. The suspect was a former member of the Black Panther Party with an extensive criminal record. Sheriff was just 35 years old, served 9 years, and the offender was sentenced to life without parole. Say their names, y'all. Prayers up, say their names. Now, we moving on. Let's go to Kate Coleman. I told y'all about Kate Coleman. If you want to know about and I'm almost done, y'all. I know y'all probably like, dang, Chuck, this too long. Am I boring y'all? I talked about Kate Coleman. If you want to know about the inner goings on with the Black Panther Party, just look up the journalistic endeavors of Kate Coleman, who is no right winger, by the way. Kate Coleman described the Black Panther Party in a June 9th, 2012 Salon article. This is what she writes. My story exposed her story. When she says her story, she's talking about her 1970 New York Times article that I made reference to earlier. She was pressured by fellow, I don't want to say fellow travelers, because I don't know if Kate Coleman was a kind of communist sympathizer, but like I said, she was surely no conservative by my research. But she was contacted by several people closely connected to the Black Panther Party, again, through their Hollywood and entertainment connections to bury the story. She's telling why they wanted her to bury her story, but she writes about it in 2012. This is about her 1978 article. I'm gonna keep going if y'all like it. Newton's bizarre leadership. My story exposed Newton's bizarre leadership. For a time, he carried a swagger stick a la Idi Amin, the Ugandan dictator. Far worse was the extortion racket he presided over that shook down pimps, drug dealers, after-hours clubs, and even a theater owner. Non-compliance left one club owner dead and undiscovered for days in the trunk of his car, which parked at the San Francisco airport. The theater owner was Ed Berkovich. He declined the tithe and refused to give jobs to Panther thugs. The theater would burn down. It was ruled an arson. Murders of rivals were also carried out on orders from above for perceived disloyalty to the Panthers. Vicious beatings of lower-ranking Panther members were regular punishments, along with turning out Panther women as prostitutes in the Panther-owned bar and restaurant, The Lamp Post. Again, that's just an excerpt from the 2012 Salon article. I advise you all to look up the research and the writings of Kate Coleman. Again, Huey P. Newton was so powerful and influential that at a time whenever there was a hit put out on Newton's life, remember, when Huey P. Newton was charged for the death of Kathleen Smith, the 17-year-old prostitute, the reason he gave because he was scheduled to be arraigned on charges and he never showed because he fled to Cuba. The excuse that he gave in large contingents of the liberal left, in particular the liberal white left, believed his claims that he fled because his life was in danger because of his stature as a revolutionary. He feared for his life. But keep in mind that there were no rival political. The people that were actually trying to kill Huey P. Newton were the criminals in Oakland who he had shook down. And Huey P. Newton was getting tipped off of the supposed plots on his life by way of Oakland PD. The Oakland Police Department had told Huey P. Newton of a plan that was orchestrated by way of a group of Oakland pimps to have him assassinated. It was a group of Oakland pimps that put out the contract on Huey's life. This was according to Oakland Police Department, according to members of the Oakland Police Department. When asked by one of my intellectual heroes, David Horowitz, when he asked Oakland authorities why they did nothing to stop Huey and Elaine Brown, the Oakland Police Department, remember, David Horowitz was a renowned leftist. Matter of fact, he too was on the staff at Ramparts. He would later have his come to Jesus moment thanks to the death of Betty Van Patter and the suicide of a lawyer by the name of Faye Stender. I'm going to talk a little bit about Faye Stender in a second. But David Horowitz asked the Oakland PD, why y'all letting this happen? We all know that this man is doing this. He said, it's because of you. They told David Horowitz, because of you. It's the climate that you and your left-wing activists helped erect around Oakland, San Francisco, and Berkeley. This man is virtually untouchable because if we move on him, we will bear the brunt of the community and the activists and the intellectuals that give him cover because you all have substantiated the myth that Huey P. Newton is an oppressed political activist. We can't do shit. Y'all done tied our hands. Huey P. Newton didn't have no, yeah, He may have believed in all that Marxism shit, but Huey P. Newton's true ambition was to become the kingpin of Oakland crime. I wrote this down. Huey P. Newton's greater ambition was to become the kingpin of Oakland's underworld. And he largely succeeded. I'm about to wrap up. I was going to talk about a man by the name of George Jackson. Y'all know about George Jackson? Just Google the name George Jackson in the Black Guerrilla family. George Jackson was another one. The reason why I didn't include George Jackson and do a breakdown on him, because it's so much and because of time constraints, I didn't include him. But George Jackson, he was a motherfucker, boy, I tell you. And another reason why I didn't include him, because again, he's like another Capadonna to the Wu-Tang Clan. It's a lot of mixed accounts and testaments as to whether or not George Jackson was an actual member of the Panthers, but he was the leader of a black prison gang called the Black Guerrilla Family, and they were so-called political in nature because George Jackson was baptized while in prison in the teachings of Lenin, Marx, and Mao. He would even say, George Jackson would go on to say that it was Lenin, Marx, and Mao who, I quote, redeemed him. If you want to know about the deeds of George Jackson was killed during an attempted prison break. But Faye Stender, who I mentioned moments ago, was his lawyer. And George Jackson would put a hit out on Faye Stender's life, leaving her shot up in the form of a crucifix, which left her paralyzed. She would later go on to commit suicide. But she was also George Jackson's, Faye Stender was George Jackson's lawyer and lover. She started she started this prison. I forgot what she called it, but she had a group of lawyers that she pretty much commanded, who only took on convicts as clients, those who were, Anyway, I didn't want to get too much into George Jackson and look up him and the Soledad brothers. And I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to leave it there. George Jackson was you talk about a psycho. And he also had a famous quote that he said, man, Marxism was my hustle. That was a quote from George Jackson. Marxism was my hustle. Now I'm going to end this. And again, you can just look up the personal accounts of the wardens and the people who were there who saw George Jackson operate. He was the most feared man in that prison. Somebody said he was locked up in San Quentin. Anyway, again, he was seen as some political prisoner, some political revolutionary, because again, he touted Marxism, but he was a stone cold killer. The Shadow of the Panther. What's that? The Shadow of the Panther was a book written by Hugh Pearson. Hugh Pearson is very important because Hugh Pearson is a black man. I think Hugh Pearson's still alive. I started to pull up some biographical information on Hugh Pearson, but in the interest of time, I didn't. But Hugh Pearson wrote a book that was published in 1994 called The Shadow of the Panther. And Hugh Pearson, too, like Kay Coleman, is no right-winger. I'm going to read Hugh Pearson. Hugh Pearson helped peel the veil off the Black Panther Party. And what prompted him was in the wake of the book of David Hilliard's and Elaine Brown's memoir. He deemed them too self-justifying and too self-gratifying. He wanted to know what really went on behind the scenes with the Black Panther Party. Now I'm going to read, and I've never read The Shadow of the Panther, to be fair. I'm just making reference to it. I'll probably read it in the future at some point, but if you're interested, you all can go read The Shadow of the Panther. Here is an article written in commentary. This was published in September of 1994. This article was written by Arch Puddington. And Arch Puddington is breaking down Hugh Pearson's work and his book, Shadow of the Panther, in this commentary article. And I'm going to read Arch Paddington's words, and I'm going to end it up here. This is deep. The Panthers, with their brilliant, fearless chieftain, came to be regarded as a kind of domestic Viet Cong. Again, y'all. The new left in the 1960s had abandoned the kind of intellectualism that came to define the old left during the Stalinist period of the Comintern. That was sparked by Lenin in the Third Communist International. They began to believe that the revolution was afoot. And this was in the wake of, Charles Manson. It was a lot of stuff going on, yeah. And y'all know Charles Manson, too, had a lot of buddies in the entertainment world.
But I digress. And he always so bright about Helter Skelter and the coming race war, like members of the Weather Underground would too. Members of the Weather Underground not only was Che Guevara, but I keep saying Marilyn Manson. Charles Manson was also one of the heroes and idols of the Weather Underground. Just go and read their Prairie Fire Declaration if you don't believe me. But again, the new left became more violent because they were taking their marching orders from the examples that they saw that had currency in their mind, the examples of the French Revolution, and the fact that the North Vietnamese in their minds was successfully taking on the world's most powerful military superpower in a war. And the radicals in America, the new left in America, began to believe that if the North Vietcong can face up to the United States and pretty much fight them to a stalemate, then the revolution is afoot. We can do this. And they believed that the Black Panther Party was their Viet Cong, their vanguard. That is a quote. You hear Arch Puddington said it here, but it was either, I can't remember who it was either Robert Scheer, Michael Lerner, or Tom Hayden, or Mark Hinkle. One of the 60s white radicals was one of the ones who originally coined that suggestion that the Black Panther Party was America's Viet Cong. They believe that fuck all the intellectualizing. The revolution is here. It's time to go to war. This is why the left became so violent in the 60s and 70s. The left was convinced that instances of Panther violence were the result of police provocation. According to Hugh Pearson, however, violence and outright criminality were not incidental to the Black Panther Party, but of its very essence. Basically, Pearson points out Panther violence derived from the kind of men recruited to the organization. Tough, urban, street blacks, often ex-convicts, uneducated, and therefore likely to challenge the authority, and therefore unlikely to challenge the authority, the intellectual authority of Newton, Cleaver, and others. They were just going with y'all understand. It's easy to take these silly, you know what I mean? Look at what they're doing. Watch my boy Chad O. Jackson's documentary, Uncle Tom 2, and look at the footage. Are these crazy? Look at them. And you have these so-called black intellectuals, Hank Rogers, a.k.a. Ibram X. Kendi, and Ta-Nehisi Coates, and using these broken, fatherless, immoral, uneducated, impulsive, immature men and women, and using them like Huey, who read Plato's Republic, again, who was influenced by Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, Fritz Fanon. These young motherfuckers who's out here willing to kill a cop, they don't know nothing about that, man. They not reading Greek philosophy. They aren't PhD'd, but Huey P. Newton was. As Bobby Seale put it, this is a quote from Bobby Seale. He, as in Huey, wanted brothers who had been out there robbing banks, brothers who had been pimping, brothers who had been selling dope, brothers who ain't gonna take no shit, brothers who had been fighting the pigs. Those are the kind of men that Huey and Seale recruited. In Pearson's view, the Black Panther Party compounded the race problem by romanticizing the black lumpen proletarian, that's a Marxian term, the lumpen proletarian, while denigrating the values of the black middle class. Y'all really need to tap into the work of my friend Chad O. Jackson. Pearson contends that despite their self-destructive history, the Black Panther Party retains a legendary appeal for a generation of young blacks who were not even alive during the heyday of Newton, Cleaver, and Seale. At the time when black authenticity is often equated with macho posturing, the Panthers are frequently perceived as the most authentic of all the civil rights icons. In an earlier era, publishers touted Eldridge Cleaver's writings as a, quote, document of prime importance for an understanding of the outcast black American soul. That's deep. Today, this was 1940, so today,
a Los Angeles gang member, Monster Cody. I don't know if y'all familiar with the Crip street legend, Monster Cody. In his biography, all the left, they love the biography of Monster Cody. Start that sentence over. Today, a Los Angeles gang member, and I've never read Monster Cody's autobiography. Today, a Los Angeles gang member, Monster Cody, is billed as a, quote, primary voice of the black experience. And so it goes. So that's my discussion for today, y'all. I'm going to end this with a quote, and I was promised this is the last thing. That's all I got. I done got through 9 pages worth of notes. This is a quote from one of my intellectual mentors and someone who I respect a great deal. If you aren't familiar with this man's scholarship, if you really want to understand what conservatism is and what it's all about, you all really need to familiarize yourself with the late, great Sir Roger Scruton. I'm going to end this with a quote from his book, my favorite Scruton book, or one of my favorites, titled Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands. Scruton says, left-wing politics has discarded the revolutionary paradigm advanced by the new left in favor of bureaucratic routines. Let me say that again. Left-wing politics has discarded the revolutionary paradigm advanced by the new left in favor of bureaucratic routines and the institutionalization of welfare culture. The two goals of liberation and social justice remain in place, but they are promoted by legislation, committees, and government commissions empowered to root out the sources of discrimination. Liberation and social justice have been bureaucratized. Sir Roger Scruton. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the legacy of the Black Panther Party. A legacy of mayhem, Marxism, and murder. I'm out.